Awesome. So this project, the one that I have here set up for us, I haven't touched yet. I haven't done anything other than I've removed the main view controller that comes with the Xcode project. And I've also removed the accompanying view controller file, the Cocoa Touch file that comes with it as well. So we've just got like a blank template for a file here. So if you cloned this, that's what you should be getting here. Like I said, guys, if you have questions as we go along, let me know. I'm going to treat this as kind of like me asking you guys what we should do next. And as a team, we collectively try to move through the project based off of kind of your thought process. Before we do anything else, this is my biggest recommendation whenever you guys do a sprint challenge is I know that you're going to be really eager to jump right in and start to like build out your UI and see what kind of code you can run. But my recommendation is come into the actual challenge first and read through it really thoroughly. So I already know what's kind of on here. You guys have seen it as well. But there were a couple of you yesterday that started to build this app and you didn't configure your layout to be like this. And so make sure you watch this GIF and see kind of how the instructors have, anticipated that your final product's going to be. Because if we can see here, we've got a detail view. There's a main table view where we're going to hit the search bar. It's going to pull up a view controller. We're going to search for a Pokemon. We'll be able to save it. It'll go back to our table view controller. And then once we are there, we can select any Pokemon in that table view controller and see more information about them. So first off the bat, just make sure that you've got the right idea in mind of what the app needs to look like. Because if you start making something else, it might look good and sharp, but as far as MVP, it won't, hit it. Okay, so here's the documentation. We're going to talk about this in a little bit so you guys, can have some clarity and some understanding of what's going on with it here. If for any case the API crashes, they've got a little note here that we can use a different API. We probably won't. PokeAPI is actually pretty reliable. And then these are already things that I think you guys are aware of, but we need to have some sort of model object that's going to have a Pokemon name, ID, ability, and types. And then we want to display a list of those Pokemon that show up and then show a sprite, which is just like a fancy way of a video game way of saying image. And then we want to be able to save them. So if you think about this conceptually, it's kind of like we're searching for a Pokemon. If we like the Pokemon, we can save it and put it into like our Pokemon team. And then once it's saved into our team, we can go back and select it again and see more information about the Pokemon. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the outside of the documentation, the directions so far? Pretty good? Okay. Let's go take a look at the documentation just to get a feel for what it is. Okay. So one big thing to look for right away when you get to an API is just make sure that it's going to respond to a get method, because if you want to get information, you want to get a JSON, we're going to need it to be get. Okay. If I were needing a base URL, like I always will, for an API, some contact, can anyone tell me maybe how I would go about trying to find that?
The documentation.
Yeah, we're in it right now. Where do you think it could be in the documentation?
Under Pokemon.
Yeah, what I'll usually do is the actual website is generally the base API. So like there may be some endpoints that lead you to like the actual documentation page. So if you look up here, like this is redirecting us to the documentation of the second version in an HTML format of this actual PokeAPI. But for the most part, unless an API tells you otherwise, this first aspect is going to be our base URL. And I'll show you guys the way you can check it. We talked a little bit on Thursday night about Insomnia. But when you come down here, it'll tell you different endpoints that you can get. And so if we look around, I can see the endpoint right here. It says API v2 endpoint. So this is obviously going to be something that we're going to want to pass into it, some sort of information. I actually gave you guys a hint in the channel yesterday in iOS 9 where I actually gave you the base URL. I don't know if you guys actually saw that, but I gave it to you. So if you're ever confused about what the base URL might be, just use Insomnia. So I've got Insomnia here. And I'll just make a new request so you can see. Okay, so this is where we're going to put our base URL. And then I just copied and pasted it from up here, but I'm just going to do it again so you can see. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be our base URL. I don't know for sure yet. This is just like a way to test and make sure. So I'm going to paste that in there. And then this is only going to give me a website. It's not going to give me any actual data. I already know for a fact. But all these endpoints down here have some information for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, this is an endpoint. Let's try and copy this and see what kind of information we get back from using it. Now this first test, and I did an extra print backslash there, but this first test isn't going to work because obviously this endpoint means that it, we want to pass in some information there. See, it says 404 not found. So this is just generally when you guys network, always before you even write any code, before you do anything in your Xcode project, come to Insomnia and just play around to see what kind of information you're getting back. Because if you're putting in the wrong base URL and you build your whole project and you're so frustrated that your code isn't working, it might not be your code. It might just be that you have the wrong base URL to use. So then instead of using endpoint, maybe I'll try something. So you don't have to be super familiar with Pokemon to know like a little bit about it. Someone give me a name of a Pokemon.
Bulbasaur.
Bulbasaur. And if you needed to know, you could Google that and see. Okay, so now that I've looked at this, I think, okay, this isn't working. This isn't exactly what I want here right now. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the documentation and I'm going to keep playing around again to see, because this one says get API endpoint, and then down here it says what kind of endpoints I might pass in. So this probably isn't what I want to use. And now it might take a couple of trial and error, but usually APIs are pretty navigable in that they have some like categories for you to go to. We're going to want to get some Pokemon information, and there's a nice little link to the Pokemon endpoint. So if I come down here, I can see, oh, this is how I get some ability information. There's a whole nice navigable bar here about other Pokemon. There's another one, like a sub one inside. So if like I wanted to know the gender, if I wanted to know what shapes or species they are, I'm going to just look around for a bit and kind of get a feel for what might be there. So now I clicked on this Pokemon one right here. And so now we look at this right here and it says Pokemon get, here's the endpoint. And then I can see this is what they want me to pass in, the ID or the name. And then if I passed in Butterfree, it looks like a JSON, right? This is the JSON that I would get back. So let's go try that. So instead of doing what I did earlier, the only thing that was wrong with that endpoint is I needed to include Pokemon there. So now let's try Bulbasaur again. There we go. We've got JSON data for what I'm guessing is Bulbasaur. I know a little bit more about Pokemon than the average adult should probably know, so I know that this is correct. But I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that like this is kind of what we're going for here. We're getting an endpoint. We're going to the API. We're going into the second version of the API. We're looking for a specific Pokemon, and in order to do that, we have to give it a specific name. You guys with me so far?
Yep.
What questions do you guys have about using documentation?
Okay, so like if it's not written out good, right, and documentation, can we still just snag the URL, put it in here, and then see what pops up?
Yeah, I mean, that's like usually how I'll do it, is I will come back through and just try to play with it enough times and see what kind of information pops up for me. So there was another project I was working on this week, and it used like amiibos. I don't know if you guys know what amiibos are, but they're like used for Nintendo games, and they're like statue figurines that they're like display items, but they also are like used for in-game stuff. But an amiibo, has just like, there's this API that gives you information about it. And so what I would do if I was coming to this API for the first time is like, obviously I'd want to like learn a little bit about it. Like, oh, I don't need to authenticate. I don't need a bearer token. This is a get only. So I'm only going to be doing get requests here. And then I would come through, and every API will at least give you endpoints. If nothing else, they'll give you endpoints and a description of what to do. So what I'm going to do here is I can see an endpoint, and then I can see that there's like, you guys can see that this is white and this is gray, right? In my browser. So like this is probably the base URL. So I'm going to copy that, come back into my Insomnia. Sorry, it's going to take a sec. Come back into my Insomnia, and then I'll just test that to see what comes up. Probably nothing. I mean, the website's valid, but I don't actually get any data from it. Yeah, so I just got like a display information of like the website. Insomnia is super cool in this. So then if I wanted to look at this, it says return a list of amiibo available in the API. I'm just going to give this endpoint a whirl and see if I get some cool information with it. And there we go. There's like a JSON, very similar to the random user ones, I would say, but there's a JSON that has an amiibo that's an array of objects. And I have like, what's the character? It's Mario. He comes from Super Mario series. I've got an image for him. I've got his name. There's a lot of cool data with it. So the way to successfully use API like documentation is to just practice, just like mess around in Insomnia with it until you're getting back the information you want. Because you're going to get so frustrated in your Xcode project if you're not getting any data back, but you could have saved yourself a lot of time with just messing around with Insomnia for a bit. Does that make sense?
My biggest confusion, Mitch, was with the images, and I didn't see the sprite, I guess, instruction in the Lambda instruction. So when I was looking at all the possible URLs, I couldn't figure out how to get a proper one that would give me the Pokemon with the image inside like we did for the random users. So that threw me off for quite a bit.
Yeah, so that just, it takes a little bit of just searching through. But what I would do is, so like on the API's documentation here, they gave us an example of a Butterfree JSON. So it's like this is a collapsible list. I can come through and check these things just to rifle through the information that I want. But right here it says sprites. It's like all these sprites are here. And what I can do is I could even just take this and put it into my browser and see what comes up as well. So if I paste that into my browser, it's 404, because it's an image. It's like an embedded image inside HTML, which I don't know a whole lot about web. But the best thing to do for this, we'll practice here in a little bit, is to just get a URL and then try to encode it into data, kind of what we did on Thursday night, and then turn that data into an image. So if nothing else, Austin, sorry, someone said something.
That URL should work in a web browser.
Yeah, it should work. I don't know exactly why it isn't, and it might be that the sprite itself, and I know some stuff about Pokemon that's silly, but there are some Pokemon that don't have like all these sprites. So it should work. You're exactly right. But we'll come to this later. You'll see how it will work when we turn it into data and then turn it into an image later on. To answer your question, Austin, just come through the JSON, and if the instructors wouldn't tell you that you need to get a sprite from this JSON if there wasn't actually a sprite in the JSON. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't even read the entire instructions like I should have to see that.
Yes. That's huge. You need to make sure that you do that for sure. Okay, cool. And then Josh, you came in a little bit after, but I was letting everybody know Jonah's in a separate breakout room right now. So if you feel like you're pretty close on the project and you just need to solve a bug, I can send you to that breakout room to get it figured out. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of build it from scratch in this session. It's going to be like kind of lengthy, definitely an hour long, I would say. So do you want to be in that session with Jonah, or do you just want to stick in this one?
No, I hit MVP like on the line.
Sweet. Okay.
I like to be of help, and I always learn things regardless.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, you're totally welcome to be here, and I'll ask for your input. I'll even ask, because you'll probably have done it differently than I will do it today, and that's like the beauty of programming, is there's a lot of ways to do a lot of things. So we'll all work on this together, and if you guys have questions or comments, feel free to let me know. But now that we've talked a little bit about the documentation, we know that Insomnia is giving us back that information that we want. let's go ahead and start to dive into the code to figure it out. So yeah, like a big thing, Austin, for sure, and everyone else, read the instructions before you guys get into it, because that's going to save you a lot of grief later if you're, you got an hour left and you find out, oh shoot, I did this wrong, or I set it up differently. So, okay, so let's jump in. Based on what you guys saw in the sprint challenge kind of README, with what the project is supposed to look like, how should we start laying out our UI for the storyboard? Table view controller, sweet. Okay, I'm just going to grab out table view controller, throw that guy in. And then what do we need to do to make sure that we can access this table view controller?
Navigation controller, and then your entry point.
Yes, we're going to do the initial view. And this is how a lot of today's project will go. I will be just asking you guys what to do next. I might let you just like make a mistake and just go along with it, and then you'll see why. And I think that will help you learn as we go. Okay, so far so good. Now, so we got our table view that's going to show our like Pokemon team, but we need a separate view for when we search for those Pokemon. So what should we do next?
Drag out another view controller.
Perfect. Another view. Okay, awesome.
We want to use two of those, right? One for search.
We will want to use two. We'll come back to the detail a little bit later, because we'll want to make sure that like we're actually getting the network call, putting it in our table, and then we can move on. So this is another big thing too, guys, is when you come to your projects, you're going to want to do the big picture really quickly. And I would say start with the building blocks of it. Start with like the small Lego blocks and build up, because you can always go back and add things once things are working. But there's nothing worse than trying to build out a huge app only to find out that the first fundamental part of it doesn't work. So I recommend working in steps that way. So the reason we did this first is we got to make sure we get somewhere. We have an initial view to come into. And then this is where our first kind of round of magic is going to happen. This is where we're going to make the networking call. So how do I transition from this into this?
A search bar item, bar button item.
Do I do a search bar or a bar button?
A bar button item.
Perfect, bar button item. Okay. Drag this guy out. Rainbow wheel. Okay, sweet. And then what from there?
Control drag and do a show segue.
Awesome.
But also change that item to a type search.
Sweet. It'll give us the cool little magnifying glass. And then we just made that segue. This is just good practice every time you make a segue, is to just give it an identifier. What's a good identifier to give for this segue?
Add Pokemon.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Awesome. Now we've got this. I don't want to, so when I talk about like the building blocks part of this, you guys are going to be tempted when you come into your app to flesh out all of this information. But what's going to be the, value to us if we build all these labels and connect all these outlets right away, only to find out that our networking call doesn't work? We're going to be like, oh, like better to just ensure that things are working and we check them along the way. And then we can add things that we know will work for us. That's how I like to build my apps. In our guided projects and our afternoon projects, you kind of do it a little bit differently. Guided projects are especially different because the instructors only have 2 hours to do something, and they're just like limited on time. Otherwise, I think they would do it similar to how we're going to do it today. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm trying to convert you guys to titles because titles are cool. I'm going to bring out a navigation item so that we get a navigation bar up here. And then I'm just going to make it really specific to the user what they can expect from this page. So search for a Pokemon. So then the user comes in and they know that something's going to happen here. And what we want to happen is them to search for a Pokemon. Okay. Then we're going to need a search bar because they're actually going to have to search for the Pokemon. So let's put that search bar in. Now, up until this point, this is the only UI that I need. When I'm starting an app and I'm building it out, I'm only going to do the things that I absolutely need first rather than doing all the extra fluff. Because I want to test. I want to test and make sure that things work before I start to implement all these other things. Let's do another cool thing just for user experience. I'm going to do a placeholder text inside this. And I'm just going to say, enter a Pokemon name. That way, when the user comes in, they'll just kind of have a good indication of what needs to go in that search bar. Now, we're not going to like put this on the App Store for people to use right away, but this is just good practice for you guys to get in the habit of. Just make it as user-friendly as possible. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? Pretty good? Okay. Now, we've got these files, but we want to execute some code into them. What do I need to do next?
Create subclass files.
Yeah, sweet. I'm going to go ahead and commit really quick just because I've like made a big step. I'm just going to say configure basic UI layout. And that'll just be my commit. Send that up. Cool. All right, so let's make some Cocoa Touch files for that. I'm going to get in the folder level, Command N, and then make some Cocoa Touches. So the first one's going to be our table view controller. I'm going to call it Pokemon Team Table View Controller because that's going to show the saved Pokemon. And I kind of like to think of it as like, this is my team of 6 Pokemon. Cool. So we got that one. And then let's go ahead and make another one for the detail view. And this one, so we got to make sure we class it the right file. It's going to be a UI view controller. This one, I'm going to call Pokemon Search View Controller. Just because the more files you get, the more you're just going to want to make sure you know what they are before you even click on it. So whenever I click on this file, I'm going to know exactly what it's for. Okay, and then we got to subclass these. So we'll go back in. This one's going to be our Pokemon Team Table View Controller. This one's going to be our Pokemon Search Table View, Pokemon Search View Controller. There's one thing missing in our storyboard. I'm not talking about an actual UI element that we haven't dragged out yet, but something for us, and you guys will see it here when I build. But whenever you bring out a table view controller, the prototype cells don't automatically have an identifier. So it's just good habit, and you'll see when you build, it'll have a warning. Just a good habit to always come in and give it that reuse identifier. So Pokemon cell is probably just a great word for that. Cool. So like our UI is taken care of. We've set our subclasses. We can go ahead and add some actual code inside of these. So we're pretty squared away as far as UI goes. I don't need to do anything else in the storyboard for the next little bit, which is nice. Okay. You guys with me so far? Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about the actual model file. I'm going to first organize these really quickly just because I'm OCD and I always like to do this. But let's go talk about the model file. And I think a big problem that a lot of you guys ran into yesterday was you tried to make your full-fleshed model right from the get-go. And the reason I'm going to recommend against doing that is because we want to start small and move up. So I'm going to make our model file. I'm just going to call it Pokemon. You cannot see that because of this dumb bar. Did I spell that right? Can you guys see? It was like, okay, there we go. Okay. So there's our Pokemon.swift file. Let's go ahead and make this model file. But I only want to pick the smallest, easiest, accessible JSON part to test. So rather than going to build out my whole model file from the get-go, which once you guys get good at it, you'll totally be able to, but since this is all brand new, best to start small. So let's take a peek at the JSON. And this is what we get back when we enter in any Pokemon. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to find the easiest thing that I need. So we need 4 things. We need, well, technically 5, but we need the ID, the name, the abilities, which is an array. We need the types, and we need a sprite. So out of those 5 things, right out of the gate, I'm going to say, what is the easiest one to get? Because I want to make sure my network call works. So let's go rifle through and find the easiest one. Generally, name is going to be pretty easy because it's usually a string, just like a plain string. Sometimes like on Thursday night, we had a dictionary of strings and it'll be different. And the other hard part about JSON is like, this one is huge. This JSON is enormous. And so like I'm not even a third of the way down, but as you close, you know, get down further. And I guess a better way to go about this would have been to check the website. The actual API documentation was pretty helpful for this in that it had these drop menus so that I was easily able to rifle through all the things that I needed. So if you look at this, like all of these things were just pure properties and values, whereas all of these things were like dictionaries or arrays. So a really good way for me to find out what's going to be the easiest is just to come here. So PokeAPI is actually a great documentation. They've done a good job of thinking it out. So I can see here the name is just a string. So before I try to add anything else like abilities, ID, types, whatever else I want, I'm just going to start super small. So how am I going to make this model file to just have that name property? Somebody walk me through this.
Make a struct.
Sure. Okay. What should we name it?
Pokemon.
Sure.
And then type decodable.
And if you guys did codable, that's fine too.
And
Okay,
then let's see here. And then we just want to pass in the name and then the ID, right?
Yeah, let's just do one. Let's just do one to be really like basic.
Okay, yeah. So let's just do name.
Okay.
So let name be of type string.
Perfect. Nailed it. So if you guys did codable here, it's the same thing. I don't need to encode, so I'm just going to do decodable. That's just like less work for the model to do if I give it decodable. I don't know if it takes up more memory to use codable versus just one of the protocols inside of it, but that's kind of just what I do when I do gets. Okay, cool. So we've got our basic model file. I'm going to commit right away. Let me actually put this in a file first. You guys are going to see that I'm like pretty OCD about the way I'm organized, and I recommend doing this just because it will make your life easier, I think. Okay, so now that I've made this model file, we didn't do a whole lot of code, but it was pretty like incremental in what is going forward in the project. So I'm going to say setup model object. And the other thing I want to bring to you guys' attention is I'm writing my commits in a specific way where I do a verb and then I describe what happened. So I said set up what, I configured what, I modified what. And that's generally how commits work in the real world. So try to be specific and congruent with your commits as possible. Okay, so we've made our model object. What is our next step? What do we want to accomplish through this app? What needs to happen next?
We could try and test this.
Yeah, let's test it out. How are we going to test it?
So if we go in our view controller, our view controller, and then
We make an API controller.
Yeah, we need to actually make a networking call because this is just like a placeholder. This is just a template for what our JSON is going to turn into. Our JSON is going to be this big, long line of data. And what we're telling the JSON is, hey, we want you to fit into this model. This is our Lego block for the app. And I want you to conform to this Lego block and fit inside of it. So let's go ahead and make, like you guys said, let's make an API controller. So a Swift file. And I'm just going to call this, we've been calling it Pokemon controller or API controller. I'm going to call this one Pokemon controller just because like I usually name my model controller after the model, but that could change. You know, you might have several controllers later down the road, but this is what I'm just going to call it. Call it whatever you like. Okay. And now I need my model to be manipulated inside of this file. So tell me what's the first thing I write whenever I make a model controller.
Class.
Okay.
API controller.
Yeah, I'm going to call it Pokemon controller because that's what I named it, but same thing. And then open braces for us to do the actual code inside. Now remember from our kind of first couple weeks of Lambda, this isn't actually where stuff happens. This is a template when we make an instance of it in a different file. So this is going to be like all the blueprints of things that it can do, and then we'll make an instance of this controller in one of these files, and then the magic will happen. This is just a template, okay? Okay, so let's talk through the networking method. And like you guys have seen, a lot of your networking methods have been similar to each other. They're very, very similar. So maybe someone walk me through how you wrote yours yesterday, and we'll see if it'll work for us here. So how should I start taking care of this networking method?
Let base URL.
Yes, perfect. We need a base URL. So we're going to say let base URL. And this is like first thing you should ever be doing, right? Is like make sure you have a base URL, because otherwise the networking method's never going to get anywhere. Okay. And then do I just put a string in here?
URL with a string.
URL. Yes, we got to initialize it as a URL, and we are going to have it be a string. Does anyone have any questions about why we did this? We're good? Okay. All right, and then what is our base URL?
Everything we have right now besides Bulbasaur, is that correct? It should be just
Yep.
Pokemon.
Yep, that's it. That's our base URL. Okay.
Nick, why would you include the Pokemon? Can you also just do it up until the V2? Or
Yep.
Why one over the others?
So I'll tell you the benefit of doing it this way is this. So if I just did this, then I would have to come through and append those objects onto it. There are going to be different instances down the road. You guys are going to make networking calls that take multiple endpoints. But this thing, we only need this endpoint, and then all we're going to do is we're going to append the Pokemon name onto the end. So that's
okay.
why we need our base. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, when you put it that way, that makes total sense. I see why you would do it. Okay.
Yeah, you're just making your life a little bit easier this way. So Spencer talked a little bit yesterday about how like generally you want your base URL to be as simple as possible, and that's true for most cases. In this case, we are only using one URL and adding one thing onto the end of it. So we are okay to use this. You guys are completely welcome to come in here and then say, you know, once you make your URL session, you can say, you know, let request URL equal base URL. I don't know why that's not populating already. Dot appending path component, and then you could add in those aspects of it, but it's just more work and more lines of code for you. So that's the reason why I just did. Whoops. That's the reason why I took that full endpoint. And then does anyone have questions about why I used a bang operator at the end? Or does that make sense?
To force it.
Yeah, I mean, like, if this isn't the right URL, we want to know, like, right out of the gate. This is one of the few instances where, like, it's kind of recommended to use a bang. Because if we're not going to get the networking call, this app is going to be useless, right? Okay, cool. All right, so now that we have this base URL, how should I go about setting up the actual networking function?
Do you set up the request?
Yes, we're gonna do that after we've configured the function. We're gonna do that inside of the function itself.
Okay, yeah, so set up a function called get Pokemon.
Sure.
That would work.
Pokemon, okay.
And then we need to have like the completion and escaping, right? The completion handler.
Okay. Okay. And then there is a parameter that we pass in. And if we get the parameter, great. If we don't get the parameter, we want to hop out of the function. In other words, we want to have a way to escape the error. So there are several ways to go about doing this. I'm going to show you guys generally the way that we're going to use it going forward. And I'll explain the syntax behind it in just a second. But basically what's happening here is, and I'll open up this. Basically what's happening here is we are going to pass in this closure, and in the closure, we're going to get one of two results. We're either going to get a Pokemon or we're going to get errors. We might get a mix of both. Depending on which error we get, we're going to want to escape out of the function. So if we get the right Pokemon out, we're going to want to escape out in a certain way. If we get an error, we're going to want to escape out in a different way. So if this looks like kind of Greek to you guys, that's okay. It's going to make sense here in a little bit. But like closures are tough, just as is. They're like tough things. We're missing a fundamental part of this function, though. We're missing a parameter in this function.
Search name.
Yeah, we need to, because like the whole point of this, right, is in our storyboard, we set up this search bar, and somehow we want to get the text from this search bar, and then we want to pass that text to be at the endpoint right here, right? Because when we type in Bulbasaur, we get all this cool information. But if we don't type Bulbasaur, let's see what comes up. Probably everybody. Yeah, we got like all of our Pokemon. There's only 20, but as soon as I put in the correct endpoint, I get all this information about the specific Pokemon, which is what we're going for here.
I think it's useful to know what happens when you put in a name that's not there.
Exactly, yeah. So like, that's why Insomnia is such a great tool, because you get to play around with the actual request before you actually make it happen in code. So I'm a big Insomnia fan for sure. Okay, cool. So we've set up this function to be called. Austin, you said something about the request, right?
Yes, we set.
So this is a great time where we first implement what needs to be added onto the base URL. So how am I going to go about adding something to this base URL?
Creating a property that will hold the base URL and then using the append component method.
Yeah, let's just make a new, so like we've already got a base URL. Let's make a new constant, and I'm going to call it request URL. You can call it request. We've been calling it request or request URL in class a lot. The reason we call it that is because this is what we are requesting from the website, from the API. So we're going to say let request URL equal, and then how do I add something onto the end of the URL? You guys know this. You've done it a lot.
You would be surprised, Mitch. No, let me look it up, actually, because I don't have it off the top of my head.
You're good.
You're going to start with the base URL.
Yeah. So base URL. Okay.
Not append.
Okay. Dot appending path component. This is the basic one. Whenever you're confused about these things that pop up and what to use, this one says returns a URL constructed by appending the given path component to self. Self meaning the base URL. So we're just going to add something onto the base URL. What are we going to add to the end of this?
Would it be a name or search or?
Yeah, we gave it a parameter right here, right? Search term. So what we're saying is, when this function starts, this is the URL we're going to start with, and then the user is going to give us a search term from that search bar, and I'm just going to tack it onto the end of that base URL so that when the network call is made, we get the specific information about whatever they typed in. Okay, cool. There's something wrong with this, but we're going to come back to it. But you guys did, like, we're on the right track for sure. Okay. Now, how do we, and we talked about this Thursday night, how do we connect our Xcode project to the API? How do we actually make contact?
URL session.
Yep, URL session. And then .shared is just like the way that we make an instance of it. So think of this dot shared as just doing this. So URL session dot shared, and think of this as like we're setting up the web browser. This is like our Google Chrome web browser that we can start to do something in. Okay, so we've got URL session shared, and then what else are we trying to do here?
Pass in the request URL.
Yeah, I mean, both of these will work for us.
Data task.
Both of these data tasks will work for us. Do I want to use this one with or without the completion handler?
With the completion handler?
With the completion handler, because the completion handler is going to give us data, a response, and an error. Generally, we will use the closure for it. Okay, so what URL am I going to pass in here? Am I going to pass the base URL or the request URL?
The request URL.
Why the request URL?
Because you're pinning the path component search term in the let.
Yeah, because if I put in base URL, we already saw this in Insomnia. If I put in the base URL, I'm going to get information that is not what I want. I get all these Pokemon. But if I append the path component of like Pikachu, then I get the JSON information that I need. So that's why we use request URL. Okay, whenever you guys see a closure like this that's like grayed out and there's like a bunch of parameters, just double click it or hit enter. And then it'll open up for you to execute some code inside. So this first data, and this is just boilerplate stuff that we're gonna do. We're gonna do data. We haven't talked about response yet, so don't worry about response. And then we're gonna do error. So what this is gonna say is, if we get data, let's do something with it. If we get an error, we need to know about it. So let's tackle the error first. I usually like to do error handling as quick as possible just to get it out of the way. So how do we check for an error here if we make this URL session?
Let error equal error.
Sure, we're gonna do an if let just in case there's not actually an error. If let error equal error, then what do I want to do?
NSLog.
Sorry, say that a little louder for me.
NSLog.
Yeah, we'll do NSLog. We can do NSLog. We can also just do a print statement too. It's totally fine. I think I'm going to just try to keep it as simple as possible for you guys. Use like terms that you're familiar with, but normally NSLog will be probably the best way to go. I'm just going to say print error. We called it get Pokemon. So I'm going to say error getting Pokemon with, yeah, let's just say error getting Pokemon, and then we'll call error. Okay, and then here, I want to call completion, because what that means is if we get an error, I want to get out of this function. I don't want to try to perform anything else here. That's kind of what's happening up here, is we're expecting a result, and it's going to be either the Pokemon object or it's going to be an error. So what's actually really cool about this is this error that this closure is asking for comes from a protocol called error. You don't need to know a whole lot about this error, but it's just got a cool indicator of stuff we can do with it. It's actually an enum. So I'm just going to call completion and then access the enum value of this error property. And then it's got these three things, but generally either it's going to fail or it's going to succeed. So if we get an error, we want it to fail. If we get an actual Pokemon object back, we want it to succeed. So I'm going to say failure because we got an error. And then do you guys know what I could pass inside of this failure or whatever this parameter might be? This probably is the first time that some of you are seeing this. It's just error. We just pass in the actual error here. And then what we have to do whenever we do an if let is we have to just return. Okay, so what questions do you guys have about this line 21 right here?
Why the return? Is that something common to all if lets?
I think it might yell at us if we don't. Let's try. And maybe because we called that specific completion, we don't have to. Yeah, maybe we don't have to do return because the completion is going to like exit out of it for us anyways. Generally, if the compiler yells at you, it's like, hey, you didn't return, you can just hit return. But I think this actual completion statement is going to do it for us, which is really cool. That's a really cool feature of this protocol error.
I would say it's just best practice too, just in case.
Yeah, just good to like return, because you never know if like code isn't perfect. No coding language is perfect. And like JavaScript is really famous for like doing funky things with strings and such. And like, we just want to be really safe as possible as well. So does anyone want to try to explain to me what line 21 is?
Someone is trying to run completion, right? We're going to see if it fails.
Yep.
And then throw the error.
Yeah.
If it
So this
does,
is
not
this is
complete.
the cool thing that this and this result is kind of coupled into it. You guys will learn a lot more about generics later on. And so it's like, I don't want to get into it, but this is just good boilerplate code to use when you're making network calls. The only thing that will change is like this will be your model object. But it's got this cool enum value where we can say when a completion is called, rather than calling nil inside to just say like, something went bad, get out of the function, we can say it actually failed. Our function failed, so get out, and maybe print us the error as well here. Okay, so we've taken care of what might happen when the error comes up. What about as far as when we get data back? How do we want to make sure that we ensure that we have data?
Do try catch.
We're going to do that in a second. We want to make sure that we have data before we try to do anything with it.
Guard let data.
Or let data equal data else. And then here, let's do the same thing that we did earlier. So I'm going to do a print statement. I'm just going to say error retrieve. I'm going to say retrieving data from data task. And that's a pretty like thorough error for me there. And then let's do the same thing that we called with this completion statement. So let's just say completion. And because we didn't get data, because we said, hey, if there is data, let's move on. If there isn't data, let's call completion. And we'll say that it failed. And now we don't have an error to pass in here. Actually, I think we might. We can try. Yeah, it's going to ask us to unwrap it. I'm going to cut a corner here, and I'm just going to say NS error, because it's just like kind of a generic error that the compiler won't yell at us for. And then we're just going to return. So do you guys see how this completion is sort of working? You don't really have to worry about what goes in the parameter, just as long as you have some sort of like indication of why it failed. But this cool enum as part of this generic is it either tells us, hey, it failed or it succeeded, which is ultimately what we want to know out of this function.
Mitch, could you clarify what's the difference on line 20 and line 25, or sorry, 26, between NS error and error? Like why use one over the other? And I guess.
So this error is coming from, so if we hover over it, you can see what actually it's related to. So I'm clicking this error and all these errors are related. And then this error comes from the parameter that we passed in. So it's kind of just like this trailing error that our data task is checking for. But the problem with down here, I totally could have said error. But the problem is it's like, hey, I want you to unwrap this error because it needs to check for this error again. Because we checked for it here in this conditional, but then we'd have to check for it again. And I'm just lazy, so I'm just going to do NS error. Because this print statement is going to be a better indicator to us of what kind of error it was than this might be. But this failure closure just requires some sort of parameter to be passed in.
Oh, okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so what we did here is we checked if there was an error. And like I said, guys, I've talked about this before. Line 19 through 28, you don't need. Like, you don't absolutely have to do those, but good programmers will do them. You'll do a lot of preemptive checking to save your day, to make sure that you're okay. So that's why that's so critical. Okay, so moving ahead here, Austin, now you said there's something that we needed to actually like make happen here. What were you talking about earlier?
Oh, do try catch.
Do try catch, exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say do try something and then catch it if it doesn't work. That's kind of how a do try catch works. I'm the type that I kind of like crunch my code together a little bit. It's probably not the best thing for me to do, but I just want to make it concise so you guys can see it. But generally, we'd probably space this out a little bit more. It's fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to decode this a little bit. So I'm trying to think of a good question to go about doing this without just actually just starting to type it. I guess first thing, we need to have somewhere for this decoded data to live. So what I try to do after that do is I just give it a place for it to live as soon as we've decoded it from JSON. Because if we never, if we decode the JSON and then it doesn't get attributed to a value, we'll never get to use it. It'll just be like floating data in our function. So I'm going to give it a place to live. And then the try function needs to happen now. So what are we going to try to do here?
Code.
Decode. Cool. Someone walk me through how I write out this whole decode aspect.
A JSON decoder dot.
Close. We're going to actually initialize it first.
And then dot decode.
Dot decode. Perfect. Okay. And then now it's asking for two parameters. It's asking, one, what kind of object are we trying to decode? And two, what data source are we giving it? So what type are we trying to turn this JSON into?
A Pokemon.
Yeah, it's our model. It's our building block that we've made. It's our Lego block. We're trying to take JSON, all this cool information, and turn it into this awesome, simple model object that we've made. So it's just going to be a Pokemon. And remember, we always just have to reference self. I'm going to still look up exactly why self is necessary here. I guess we could try to let it compile and see what it says. Self to reference the type object. It's like not a great indicator of why we need self, but I'm just going to go with it. Okay, and then what's our data that we're going to pass in?
Data above.
Yeah. I want you guys to just know that this, whenever you hover over something, you can see where it kind of stems from. Let me build this again. You can see where it stems from. So like, I can hover over this data comes from here, and then this data comes from the closure. So when we make the URL session happen, what our function here, our networking function is looking for is it's looking for data and it's looking for error. The data is just JSON. It's just JSON data. I can totally call this JSON data and it will be the same thing. Okay, and then we can call this Pokemon data. I just want to let you guys know that like these things are super malleable, and whatever you need to do to make them indicative of what they are, do that, because it will help you a lot. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about where we're getting this data from? Pretty clear on where it's from? Okay, all right. Now, we've got a Pokemon, hopefully, right? Like if everything goes smooth and it decodes the right way, we'll get this Pokemon that'll fit in our model object. And if I hover over this, it should be of type Pokemon because this is the type we're asking it to be in the decoder. So what I can do, and this is just really good practice for you guys, is print Pokemon. Print whatever you have, and then you'll just be able to see kind of more information about it. When at runtime, it'll go through. Okay. All right, so hopefully if we've got it, we can print it, and we'll all be good to go, but we have to do something here. There's a missing aspect of this do part. Can anyone? I'll actually like be stoked if you guys know it because this is kind of a new thing as of today. How do we get out of our function once something's been completed?
You have to exit.
Yeah, and how have we done that up until this point? We've done it twice already in this function.
Return.
Nope, not quite.
Or
Use the completion.
Completion, yeah, completion means finish. We're done with it. We're done trying to execute something. So this is the cool part now where hopefully if everything goes well and we get what we want, we can indicate success. Now, inside this success parameter, we want to indicate whatever was successfully decoded. That's what's going to go inside. So what should we put inside this success parameter?
Pokemon.
Pokemon. So if everything goes well, we'll say, sweet, finally it succeeded. It might have failed here because we had an error, or it might have failed here because we didn't have data. But if everything went well, we succeeded, and we can get out of this function. Okay. Now, last thing, we need to catch. We need to do a catch statement. I'm just going to do a print. NSLog would be totally fine too. I'm just going to print for time's sake. And I'm going to say error decoding data to type Pokemon, maybe. That might be a good indication. And then I'll just put the error inside. So that if this error happens, this will be super indicative of where I'm at in the function and what went wrong. Okay. And then one last time, if this failed, what do we want to do?
Run completion.
Completion. And then what are we going to pass inside of this?
Failure.
Dot failure, because it's an enum. And then inside this failure, I think we should just be able to write error because we used this error already. Yep, we did.
Now, do we have to run completion again outside of that?
Because we use the success aspect of it, we shouldn't need to. That's the beauty of using this generic. Other times we might have to because the function might run through and not know when it needs to escape. But in here, it's going to escape whenever it encounters this certain completion. So we can indicate all the times where it should fail and hop out, and then the one time it should succeed and hop out. So we shouldn't need to call completion anymore. Realistically, this code, we could totally take out and not use if we don't want it. But it's just good to ensure that we have stuff and that we're, checking for errors and such. There is one more thing that we're missing inside of this function.
The dot resume.
Yes. Does anyone want to explain to me what dot resume does?
Just resumes the process of the application, I think.
Yeah, it's if you wanted to put it in terms of someone that doesn't code, it's like hitting enter when you type in the browser. It's like you hitting enter and then everything happening after enter. That's why resume is like really critical. It just means we're going to set up this data task and I want you to do it as long or as many times as you need to get this code to work. Ideally, it'll just go once. Sweet. Okay, if everything worked, what we can expect, and actually maybe I should ask this. Does anyone want to explain what we did from line 13 down to 37? You don't have to like write out each line of code, but just tell me what's happening inside this function.
We're setting up the request URL, and then we're opening up that shared data task with that request URL, and then inside that we're just going to make sure there's no errors. And if there's no errors, then we're going to decode the Pokemon. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all we're doing is we're setting this up specifically so that we pass in a search term, we can add it to the end of this base URL, and then from this data task, we can get, there's supposed to be 3, but we're just going to either get data or errors back Those two are the things that we're expecting to get from this data task. We're saying, hey, if there is an error, I want you to fail out. If there's not data, I want you to fail out. If there is data, I want you to decode it and put it in this format that I've created. Because yours is in JSON, but I want to put it into my own custom format. And then if that didn't work, if something went wrong with this decoding, I want to know about it. So one of these days, I really just need to write like a good template for you guys. My other students, I usually send off like a document every night before the next lecture that just kind of is a good like cheat sheet. And I think I will do that for you guys later. I probably should have done that this week, but it was kind of a scramble. But anyways, that's kind of what's going on in this get Pokemon function. Okay, so let's go and give this a whirl and see if this works for us. So how am I going to go about getting this information? How am I going about actually going to use this function? What do you guys think? Or even a better question is, where should I use this function?
Did we create a Pokemon search?
Yeah, we have that file.
Okay. We could link some stuff up and use it in there.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go ahead and do it in there. Okay, so I don't think that we'll need to use prepare for segue at all. And I'm going to commit really quick because we made our networking method. Commit. Okay. And then, hold on 1 second. Okay. Alex, if you're in here, you're totally fine. I'm not worried about it. Alex just messaged me asking about if it's okay for him to watch this, and I was like, yeah, you're absolutely fine. Okay. So we've got this method that hopefully will work for us. And then we actually need to call it because this is just a template, right? So what do I need to do to actually gain access to using that method?
Make a constant for the controller.
Perfect. So I'm going to say make Pokemon controller equal Pokemon controller. And we're going to come back and modify this. This isn't actually how I'm going to want to do it, but this is good for testing sake. Okay. Now, I can call it, but the problem is we asked for a search term to be implemented. So we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work to add in that search bar and make sure that we can extract data out of that search bar, some text, to get the information. So what do I need to do to configure that search bar?
Connect the search bar with an outlet.
Yep. So let's go ahead and just connect this guy here. I'm just going to call it search bar. Okay. So we've got a search bar, which is great, but there's going to be a problem here. We can't actually do anything with the search bar because a search bar is kind of a unique UI in that it requires some sort of communication with the view controller it lives in. So what else do I need to implement to use a search bar?
Do you have to make an extension?
We could make an extension. I'm not going to because we're not making a very complicated app. Extensions are great for if you have like a lot of code. What's an alternative that we can do rather than making, and you're on the right track, what would we put in the extension?
Can you say search bar.delegate?
Yeah, where are we going to do that and why are we going to do that? I guess I should ask.
In the view did load, and I believe the search bar comes with its own delegate. So it's .delegate.self, I believe.
Not quite. It's going to be search bar.delegate is equal to self. What that's meaning is that the search bar has something that it's like using a walkie-talkie with. So the search bar is going to change, and it's going to tell something else that it's changing. That's what a delegate does. So it's kind of weird to think about, but the search bar needs to communicate with our Pokemon search view controller. They need to be interacting. They look like they're layered and they're together because it's just on top of it, but the search bar is separate from the view controller right now. It just lives on top of it. So what am I missing here? Look at this error message.
Pokemon search view controller. Someone with the delegate.
Yeah, it's saying.
Oh, you need to put the in class. Don't you need to add comma UI search bar delegate?
Yeah, I can just fix it. It'll probably do it for me. Oh, that's not right. But yeah, we need it to conform to the delegate protocol. So we're going to say UI search bar. We did this with the Jedi project, so this hopefully shouldn't be like a surprise. This is in the Star Wars project. But we're just going to say, hey, this view controller is going to also be the delegate for the UI search bar. It's just going to be looking for when new text goes into the search bar.
So why would an extension ever be needed if it has its own delegate? I know you said something about being if it's a massive project, but how would that matter either way?
Because it's good to organize code based off of what it does. So if I were doing specific things with the search bar, I'm going to want to scroll down to the bottom and do them in a block of code. If I'm going to do something with a different delegate, I'm going to do that in an extension in a different block of code. You'll see later why that's important, but like once you get building some projects that are hundreds of lines of code, you will be glad that you make extensions, because then you'll just, anything that has to do with whatever's in the extension will just be in that little block rather than just scattered throughout your code. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
This one's simple, so we won't worry about making an extension. We did it on, I think it was kind of silly that we did it on Tuesday. We probably didn't need to, but it's fine. Okay, so we've set the delegate. We have the search bar configured. We've got our model controller so we can do something with it. But how am I actually going to start to make something happen when we type into the search bar?
You have to make an update views function?
Yeah, we'll make one of those because we want things to change. We want things to change at some point, but that's a function that we set up ourselves. We did this in the Jedi project. How do I get stuff to happen when a user has typed into the search bar? You guys definitely had to use this yesterday.
You got to use the search bar, search button, click method.
Yes. This shouldn't be news to you guys. So if we start typing it, because we've conformed to this search bar delegate, we get all these cool methods that deal with search bars. So I can type search bar, and I can see all this awesome different stuff that has to do with search bar stuff. The one that we're going to do is search bar, search button clicked, which if the user's on a phone, they're going to have there's going to be a search button in the keyboard that they can tap. When we're in the simulator, think of this as search bar enter clicked, or like enter pressed. Okay, so what that is doing is when the user types something into the search bar and hits enter, some code is going to transpire here. Because the parameter is smart enough to say, hey, search bar, I am looking at you and seeing what's inside, and we're going to do something depending on this. Okay.
And so we want to pull the Pokemon through there, right?
What do you mean?
Or so when we have when we click on the search bar, right?
Yep.
We're going to be looking in there, and then the data that we want to pull from there is the Pokemon?
Yeah, it's what's going inside of the search bar.
Search term. So I guess you got to define your search term.
Yeah, and then what we're actually typing into the search bar, that's the search term. What type is it? What is it?
String.
It's a string. That's all it is. So how do we get that string value?
Maybe search bar has like a dot type function, like a dot text.
It does. That's exactly what it does. So what we're going to do is we're going to say guardlet search term. We just want to give it a place to live, right? So we're going to say, hey, if there's a search term inside of here, it's going to be search bar dot, just like Mark said, text. And I could have done this. I could have just said let search term equal search bar dot text, but then the compiler is going to yell and say, this is optional. Why did you, whatever. We're going to use a guardlet to make sure there's actually text inside of this. Does that make sense? You guys with me so far? Okay. So what we're doing here is we're just saying, hey, in the search bar, I want you to give me the text. Now, the reason I called it search term is because that's the parameter that we gave it up here. Search term is what we're passing into this function. So what do we do next to start making some magic happen here? Come on, guys. What do you think?
You gotta call the Pokemon controller inside the function, and then with subscript syntax, call the that function we made in the API controller.
100%. That's exactly right. So we're going to say Pokemon controller get Pokemon. Okay, so it's asking for two things here. So the first thing is a string. What are we going to pass in?
I couldn't say.
Search term.
Search term.
But if Siri doesn't know,
Did you guys just hear that? That was, yeah, Siri is.
Do you mind sending me to Jonah's room again?
Oh, yeah, did it close out? Does anyone else need to go back into Jonah's breakout room? No, we're good. Okay, I'm going to send you over there right now, Will. There you go. Okay, sweet. Okay, so, and then, like I said here, whenever you get a closure with a lot of stuff going on, I just double tap it, and then it'll break up into what I need. So you can kind of call this whatever you want. This kind of result can be whatever you want to do. Do you guys remember what we called the success in this Pokemon controller function? When we got success, we called it Pokemon, because it's like the successful object that we got out of it. So this result is hopefully a Pokemon, is the idea. So we're going to say that's our result. That's the thing we're hoping to get here. And then what we're going to do is very, very similar to the do, try, catch. So what we're going to do is we're going to say guardlet Pokemon equal try, and then we're going to do Pokemon. This is going to be new to you guys. This is just goes with generics, goes with networking. It's kind of tricky, but it has this cool property called get. And what get is doing is it's just getting that JSON data for us. So we've decoded it, and now we're just putting it in the right place. Don't worry too much if this doesn't make sense to you right away. We are going to use this a lot. This is probably kind of relatively new to you. There are other ways to go about doing this function, and I'm sure some of you that like had some success with it did it a different way. This is just like a good, I don't know, I think this will help. And then we're going to return if we didn't get a result back. So all that's happening here is we're saying, hey, run that networking function, and hopefully we get a result back of Pokemon. And if we got it, I'm trying to remember what this error is. No, it should be fine.
do we have to run it? I mean, set it up as a try because it's a network kind of thing, and we're not sure whether it's going to work or not. I mean, we're thinking that it may throw.
Yeah, so think of this as just like a shorthand do, try, catch. That's what we're doing here. Is we it's kind of hard. It's difficult to explain when you guys haven't talked about generics quite yet.
But are we doing it because it's like a network kind of, I
Yeah.
guess, is it a network call or is it like reaching to the network?
It's using data that was pulled out of the network call. So you'll see how it's going to work here in just a second. I'm going to do this as, yeah, we're going to make that as an optional try. That should fix your error there. Okay, so all that's happening here is if the network call worked and we got a Pokemon, we want to put it inside this view controller. We want to have it live here. So then go back on the main queue. And like the reason why this project is so hard is because it requires stuff that is so hard to teach in a week, let alone in 3 days. You guys only had 3 days of class. We didn't even talk about concurrency or generics or any of this. And so that's why like this is hard and this is hard. And that's why I felt like I really wanted to help you guys out today, was because of this. Okay, so if we put this on the main queue, what we're going to do is, I think this is what I want to do. Yeah. Okay, we're going to add a Pokemon property. And this is just going to, live inside the view controller if we actually get it. And what's the way that if this optional value changes, how can we check for that? How can we check and like make something happen depending on if it changes?
Did set.
Did set. So we'll call it did set. And then inside the did set, this is what's going to transpire every time a change occurs, every time that optional value actually becomes a value. So this kind of trails off of what Austin was saying is we want to make something happen in the view controller. In this case, update views. We're going to want to change something here. You guys with me so far? I'm going to change this guardlet into searched Pokemon just so it's really explicit what it is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say the Pokemon that's already here is now going to become our searched Pokemon. Okay. Oh, we got to do it reverse. Whoops. No, that should work. Maybe self dot. Ooh. I think that'll do it. Yeah. Okay. So that's just what's happening here is we're saying, okay, whatever we got from the JSON, this ideally Pokemon object, let's go back onto the main thread. We're going to talk about concurrency later, so don't worry too much about this. And then we'll say, hey, this didn't exist before. This Pokemon didn't exist until we searched it and ran the network call. But now this Pokemon is whatever we searched here. And then if we go back to our model object, all we did was we just gave it a name to start with. So I'm going to be really, really simple in that this update views, I'm just going to say, hey, the title of our page should just become the Pokemon's name. That's going to be our update views. Another thing too is I don't like that that's an optional in that update views. So what I'm going to say instead is guardlet Pokemon equal Pokemon else return. Just because I don't like having that optional value there.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The other night you showed us the is view loaded thing.
Yes.
What exactly does it do? Because I'm thinking that you want to put it in your update views function.
You're exactly right. So guard is view loaded. So look it up here. It says a Boolean value indicating whether the view is currently loaded into memory. So we want to guard is view loaded, else return. So what that's doing, Mark, and I feel like a lot of you guys, this might be a tricky thing to conceptualize, is your app has layers, just kind of like how we talked about the main queue here. Your app has a lot of layers, and there's a lot of code happening all the time. Now, we don't want anything to change about our view or the properties in it until the view is ready to be shown. Because if we try to modify and fix things before the view actually appears, it's going to get messy. So what this line 38 does is it says, hey, don't do anything until the view is in memory, and then you can put stuff onto it. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good real life example. You guys like, so you have Windows, right? You have like Windows, and then there's like bug screens that you put in your Windows, and it keeps the bugs from getting in and out kind of thing. I guess just hopefully in. So what this guard is view loaded is kind of our screen. It says like, hey, don't let anything happen inside until we have the screen. It just kind of protects the view so that we can change it after it's been loaded. Does that make sense, Mark?
I feel like I've heard it a couple times now. It still isn't sinking in.
That's okay. I think in this case, we'll be able to omit it, and you'll see the difference with having the view loaded versus not having the view loaded.
Okay.
We'll have to give it a little second. We'll come back to it. But ideally now, hopefully, we search for a Pokemon, and then if it gets the Pokemon, it's going to take this optional didn't exist Pokemon. It'll be the one that we searched. And then the did set will call update views. And what update views will do is it'll say, hey, as long as there's a Pokemon, I want the title to be the Pokemon's name. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right away that our networking call is not going to work. We've set this up correctly, but our networking function is not going to work. I'm going to run the app, and you guys will see why, hopefully. If not, I'm going to let you go on break. This isn't right. This is a different app. I'm going to let you guys go on a brief break because we've been going at it for a bit. And you'll see specifically, hopefully, why this network call doesn't work. We go to the search function. Somebody give me a Pokemon name.
Pikachu.
I don't know if you can hear, but I'm hitting enter. What should be happening is the network call should be being made every time I hit enter. Oh, sorry. You guys can't see. I totally just realized that. Whoops. 1 second. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to hit enter. You guys can hear it, but nothing's happening. We're not getting any sort of network information from it. I can check our console, and what it's saying is error decoding data to type Pokemon, data corrupted, the given data was not valid JSON.
I had that same exact error.
So Will, what I'm going to do is because I already talked Will through why this happens yesterday. But Will, I don't want you to say anything. Nobody asked Will why this doesn't work. But look at this function that we've created. I'm going to take a brief break. Everyone just take a couple minutes of break. But try to figure out why we're getting corrupted JSON here. I guess I'll get rid of the simulator just so you can see. But I do want you to see it for a reason. Let's do... I'll slide it over like this. Okay. Can you guys see the function okay? Okay. So I want you to look through this and try to figure out why our JSON is corrupted or invalid. It's like such a small little tiny thing. It'll just be like such a facepalm moment when you realize it. But take a couple of minutes, try to look through it, but take a break, go to the bathroom, and then we'll come back. We're like we're wrapping it up. This is like the final parts of it for sure.
You guys know if he said he's going to be doing this a lot more often?
I believe he said that he wouldn't be doing it often. It's just that there was a lot of stuff to cover this week, and he wanted to go over it. Yeah, I think. I mean, if we continue to, like, if a lot of people continue not to pass the sprints,
Basically, if we fail, right? Nah.
yeah.
I was hoping that we would get these type sessions a lot more often, man, because it's so much helpful. And Mitchell is like a little bit more relatable sometimes, I guess.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
so too. I feel like I need to do this about 1,000 more times, and then I would get it. It just, I don't have enough. I'm just trying to fit more reps in a day as much as I can, trying to become efficient. I don't have the cognitive structures in my head to be able to access the things that they talk about, which is fine. It's just practice. So I'm cool with that.
Yo, you said a whole lot of stuff just to say we're not smart enough, bro.
No,
The
but
fancy way to say that,
disagree with that. I disagree with that completely. I think there's
It's not we're not smart enough. It's that there's so much information we can't organize it.
yeah, exactly, William. I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some smart ass motherfuckers out there, and they'll like look at it and be like, "Got it." No, so there are definitely people like that. But I mean, I think William said it best, actually.
Hey, Mark, do you know Jonah's GitHub handle? Did you have to do a pull request? Mark?
I think it's JD Borg, something like that. JDBORG or 0RG, something like that. I can't remember the whole thing. And I never do pull requests. I usually just update it, and then did he actually tell you to do a pull request?
No, he didn't. I thought we had to, but if all we have to do is do like a final commit, that works.
Yeah, I did a final commit and push, and then, I mean, if you want, you could probably send him the link if that's easier for you.
Cool. Thanks.
But I know, like, one time he did tell us to, like, take down his – I have it. Give me a second.
Okay.
Oh, is that what that was, Austin? It's the Pokemon set to an empty array?
Yeah, we just have a lot of create a place for it to live.
Oh, damn. That was simple.
Okay. So I heard you guys talking a little bit about like doing this more often. Specifically for the sprint challenge, this is pretty irregular. Like, it sort of defeats the purpose of you like pushing yourself if like we let you fail and then we just like do it over with you the next day. I think it's valid because this is tough stuff and it's like tricky and difficult to work with. But
Mitch,
what's up? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just got disconnected from the other room. Could you put me back in the other room?
Oh, sure. You bet.
Thank you.
Give me one sec. Okay. There you go. So going forward, I don't plan on doing Saturday things. One, because I like having my Saturdays off, but you guys will find that like I'm setting aside Thursday nights to do those reviews with you, and they will be hugely helpful if you just like listen to what I'm saying and what's going on, because I plan those around the next day and I kind of integrate all the things that are big about the week that we learned and then try to implement them in. It's not going to be the same app, but it's very similar. So they'll just be a huge help for you.
That's my mistake, making the assumption that it was the same exact app as the user's app. I thought we were building the same exact thing. So I kind of like messed myself up doing that, assuming.
And that's the thing, like how would that help you push yourself? You know, if I like made the app with you the night before and then you just recreated it the next day, like it wouldn't push you a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I do it that way.
I wouldn't necessarily need the whole Saturdays every single weekend, but I mean, the extra help in general is like much needed and much appreciated. So thank you, man.
Cool. Yeah.
And I think most TLs aren't, I guess, outreaching as much, at least because I don't know how other TLs. I only know because I have a new one now. But and the difference is, I mean, it's a crazy vast difference. So as I wrote in my Airtable, I think TLs should kind of step in more and help us throughout the week, kind of cement this stuff in our knowledge.
I'll tell you guys this. I went through all of Lambda and heard very little from my TLs. Like, got very little help. I mean, they weren't bad people, but it was just.
I'm sort of confused why they're there. Like, because I know some are like you, and then some are like kind of. I'm only here to kind of do what I need to do attendance wise, or ask if anyone is to cry. So I kind of am confused on what their position is.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of it now, is that it's my job to make sure that your TLs do what they need to do. So feedback is good. Give me feedback, whether in private or on your Airtables, and we will make sure that those things happen. So those are good things to indicate to me. I'm already aware of a lot of the things that you're encountering, but yeah, those are good things to indicate to me as well. Anyways, going forward, if you guys can free up your Thursday nights, or at least make time to watch the recorded Thursday night review session, I think it will be a big help to you, because I kind of culminate everything that we learn throughout the week for those afternoons to work together. Okay, so I heard you guys talking about the array. The array is actually not right. We're going to use an array later to put it into our table view, because if you look here, this is where like the array is going to be implemented. But it's not the array. We're not worried about the array right now. It's super small. What? Sorry, someone's going to say something.
So I think it's because it's case sensitive. Like it has to be like lowercase.
Yes, 100%. So watch this. So I type in write you. And then I get that error where it's the JSON is invalid, right?
So you're talking about the Pokemon that we're decoding right there, where it says Pokemon.self. That should be lowercase.
No, look at right here. So you'll see it really quickly. So there's a capital R. I come into Insomnia, and and it might be smart enough to do it for me, but I capitalize that, it's wrong. But if I lowercase it, it's right. So the problem here is that the user is typing in, and the way that Apple has it configured, search bars, first letter is always capital.
So we have to convert them, right?
Yeah, all we need to do is just make sure that this is just lowercase, that first letter. So there's a couple ways we can do it. The fastest way for me is I'm going to come to this request URL, appending path component, and then I'm just going to do dot, and then there's a really cool property called lowercase. And what that's going to do is going to take the first letter and make it lowercase for us. Do you guys see that? Like, you could have built your whole app and been so frustrated trying to figure out why things were wrong and thinking that all your code was wrong, but it was just one letter.
Yeah, it seems like a hard answer to kind of come to, even if you were to Google it or whatever. That
it's so tough.
Your JSON is wrong.
It's so tough. That's why you have to be very detail oriented as a programmer. You need to be able to not necessarily reason through every line of code that you write, but just be very careful. Just look ahead. Be smart about the things that you're typing in and searching for. That's why Insomnia is such a great tool. I think if you guys had come in and just kind of played around with it a bit first, it would have been really easy to see, like, oh shoot, I typed in a capital R and like that gave me corrupted invalid JSON.
So could you show them the do try catch where it's kind of visible that we need to have something decapitalized?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Because you told us before break, kind of look at it and see what we need to fix. How can from this do try catch can you decipher that it needs to be lowercase?
It wouldn't be the do try catch. It was just we figured out from here the user is typing in a Pokemon name, and after a while you just kind of look and see this P is capital, but the JSON is asking for lowercase. So instead of, because this string that we're passing in here, we're literally getting the exact text out of this. So it's saying guardlet search term equals search bar dot text. I'll even make a breakpoint so that you guys can see this happen.
So would that have worked if you would have just typed it all out lowercase?
Yeah, let's test it right now. It'll work. It'll work for us.
So would it work without the lowercase if you just typed out it all lowercase?
You can't. Well, I think you can, not in a simulator, but maybe on like a physical device you could. But that's not good user experience, right? Like if you had to tell the user, hey, Apple's going to auto default so that your first letter is capital, but can you go back in and make that first letter lowercase for me? Like that's just poor programming. We can do that really easily. So instead now, there we go. So we're seeing that we're making the network call. We're getting the Pokemon's name because we asked it to do a print statement. We're getting the Pokemon's name. Someone give me another Pokemon.
Pikachu.
See, it's finally working now because we're giving the network request the right endpoint. We were giving it the wrong endpoint this whole time, just with one capital letter versus a lowercase letter. I think in your README for this project, I should have the instructors go in and say something about this because it's like, it's really hard. It's a really like tiny detail.
Yeah, Mitch, I thought this was going to be a lecture, not a horror story. You're scared.
But
it's understandable.
But I think this is a really good teaching opportunity for you guys to see that like little things can make such a big deal. Some of you yesterday were like, I need to flex. I suck at this. I'm terrible. In reality, you had one character wrong, and that's why your network request might not have been working. Doesn't mean you're a bad programmer. It's just next time, just pay a little bit more attention to detail and just account for every aspect. That's why like Insomnia is a fantastic tool.
That was a major blocker for me. It kept me doing it for a while. Could you have gone into the search term and done it there? Like search term dot lowercase?
I could have just done it right here. I could have just said search term dot lowercase.
Okay, cool. I'm just trying to see like what that appends to and what allows for that.
Yeah.
So.
That would have totally worked for us. It would have been totally fine. Okay, so we've got this. We're good and taken care of. Now we know our network request works. So what I really want to drill into you guys is it's more important that your network request fires correctly than it is to make sure that your model is fully fleshed out. Because now we know our model works, right? So now if I come back into the JSON, and let's actually go to the website because the website will be a little bit easier to read. It's a little bit more readable. What else do we need to put into our model object?
Abilities, types.
Abilities, types. There's a couple other things, right? There's sprites and ID.
ID.
Let's do ID next because it's really simple. I've got a print statement so that we can see that we're actually going to get the ID back. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to say let ID be of type int because if I go back to the JSON, ID right there, and then you guys can tell that this isn't a string, right? It doesn't have quotes around it. I'm inferring that this is an integer.
Yeah, and if you scroll further down the page, it'll actually tell you that.
Yeah, right here, right? That's why documentation, like people that don't look through documentation, you don't need to be a master at it, but people who don't look through it, you're not going to do well. Like you're not going to do well.
I think my biggest challenge though was when I went to Insomnia, I saw like 7,000 lines of code. I mean, not code, but like information. So I had to like figure out like the little arrows. I didn't initially see those little arrows to kind of like collapse it and expand it.
Yep. That's the other thing too, is like the sprint challenge. Yeah, it's 3 hours and we're trying to get you to do a lot in those 3 hours, but it doesn't mean like complete the project in 3 hours. It means do your best and do what you can. If you need to take a half hour to just look through the documentation, do it. Like your employer will love you way, way more if you're thorough and careful than just like freewheeling crazy programmer, right? Come through and like get versed in what you're gonna use, what the API is going to give you. So let's just add this ID. You guys will see right away. We did this on Thursday night, but you can add the model. I've got a print statement so that when the network call fires, it's going to print what the actual Pokemon is. So what can we expect to see now when we search for a Pokemon? What can I expect to see down here?
A number.
Yeah, we're gonna have the name because we had it already, and now we added the Pokemon's ID. So someone give me a Pokemon.
Venusaur.
Venusaur. Spelling is too, but Pokemon Venusaur ID. Do you guys see how easy that was? Like, that was not hard to get the ID. We added 7 characters. 8, 9, I guess. But, like, that was so easy. That was not a hard thing to do, right? So what I'm trying to get at is just, like, just start small. Don't try to tackle, like, the whole thing at once. Try to peek out, like, what would be small and simple for you. I'm going to modify this. So instead, what if I wanted this to be capital? How could I make the title capital?
Dot capitalized.
My poor computer is just working so hard here. Come on. I promise that there's a property for dot capitalized. It's just my poor little computer. Come on, dude. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the fan is just maxed out right now. I'm just going to type it out because it will work. Okay. And then we'll run it again. But I hope that this is like clicking for you guys, that starting small is the way to go. Like, get your network requests to work. Use print statements. Make sure you're seeing information. Make sure that, you know, you're starting with the easy, simple parts of the model. And then once your network request works, you can go back in and add more things, and it's not going to be hard. Usually what I like to do now is I will start one by one, and then new things that I need to add. Because like here, we need to add a picture. We need to add a label with our abilities. I'll just do them step by step. I'll do them one at a time. And I think that just, I don't know, it might be a little tedious to hop back and forth, but I'm going to do a better job than someone who's trying to scramble and cram it all in 20 minutes, you know? Okay, so now we do Venusaur, and now it's capitalized. What if I wanted to say the ID next to the capitalized?
You can add a quotation, so it's plus, so space plus, and then quotes, and then plus, and then Pokemon.id.
Yeah. We're going to have to, well, I actually think we need to do a space, but I don't think that's going to work either way. Yeah, no. What's another way when you guys run into these string errors? How do you like add strings together?
Oh, is it because it's an integer?
Yes.
And so we need to do string interpolation.
Yep.
To pull that out.
Yep. So I'm just going to do interpolate that. And then this has to be a string now, right? Now we run it. It should say the Pokemon's name. And like, I hope I convert you guys to titles, because like titles are a great way to display information, and you don't have to do a single label for it. Oh, I keep doing the same ones. Gengar 94. I'm even going to take it a step further and say ID. Oops, I guess I should do this. ID like that. And now when I run it, I should see a printout where it says the name, ID, colon, and then the actual number. It's going to be like super easy, super cool. There we go. So yeah, from now on, guys, just like start small, build up from the basics. Don't try to configure your whole model object. I think that's like the most stressful part of this project by far. It's just trying to add up all these things. Okay, let's try and do something a little more complicated now. I'm sorry that time's gone over. I hope you guys aren't just like, you're
make
free to go whenever you want to.
I'd rather be here learning.
Okay,
Should
cool.
we make a commit, Mitch?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'll commit because now I know my network method's firing. And so I'm going to say, let's see, setup detail view controller with networking data. Make sure you guys are committing today because I want your GitHub contributions to be green. Because like if you're coding, you should get the credit for it, right? Don't go a day without putting something on GitHub, even if it's small. Okay, so we've done that. Cool. Let's add.
Do you code on the weekend then? You even go as far as coding on the weekend?
Yeah, so there's a cool website I use. It's called Edibit, and it just does like coding challenges. So I've got a repo where I do like 3 or 4 coding challenges a day and put them in a playground. And then I just drag the playground file into a repo and commit it. And so like every day I've got this archive of continuing growing code challenges and they just live in a repo online. And then
What's the website?
It's called Edibit. Here, I'll send it to you. There's actually a bunch of cool like coding challenge websites. This is just, I like this one because it's very simple and it's just it's very accessible. I'm gonna post this in the iOS 9 channel for you guys. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's just called Edibit. Okay, cool. Let's, so now we know our model's working. Let's go a little further. Let's see what, let's get through the harder data of the JSON because we've done some basic stuff here. So like this property was simple because it was just an integer. This property was simple because it's just a string. But we need some more aspects here. So what do we want to do next? Would you guys like to see the
sprites, please?
You want to see the sprites done? Sure. Okay. So I'm going to click right here and see what kind of information we're dealing with for the sprites. So first things first, what do I need to add to my model to be able to get this sprites information?
You need to add a new struct of sprites.
Yeah, we'll need to, but like just the name itself, right? Like this is a key value pair. So like we need to have this exact spelling. We need to have this sprite be part of our model object. So I'm just going to say let sprites be of, and then you're on the right track, Austin, because this is not just one value. This is a dictionary. Look right here. This is like curly braces indicating a dictionary. This is a dictionary of strings, and they're actually URLs, and I'll tell you why we're going to use URLs in a second. But so Austin's right. Because these live in a dictionary, we're just going to go a layer deeper. We don't have a sprite struct made yet, but I'm going to make it right now. Okay, so what protocol does this need to conform to?
Decodable.
Yep. Okay. So now we've gone a layer deeper. So now once you've made that struct, you can kind of think like, this is taken care of. Now we're just inside here. So we've got a ton of options. There's the back of the sprite. Have you guys ever played Pokemon before? Has anyone ever actually played it? Like when you're battling, like the back sprite.
Yeah, probably not as in depth as you did.
Yeah, it's what faces you, right? So out of
Pokemon.
Want.
Proud of it.
Jonah is saying he plays Pokemon. I play a lot of Pokemon, guys. I play a lot of Pokemon. I don't want to admit how much I play because.
Do you still use the app?
What'd you say?
Do you still use the app? You know the app that you can like walk around and catch Pokemon?
Oh.
Pokemon Go!
I don't play a lot of Pokemon Go. I used to work at Disneyland, and that's like a hotspot for Pokemon Go. So when I lived and worked there, I played a lot, but not anymore. But it's fun. I play like actual like on my Switch and like on my DS.
Oh, the new ones on
okay.
Switch are good. That's what's up.
Yep. So anyways, out of these 8, let's just pick one. What do we want to use?
We could just use a basic one.
Which one's that?
Let's go with the default that works.
Front default.
Or the front default, yeah.
Front
That
default. Let's use it. So we'll come back in here. We've got our sprite layer. So what do I need to write here?
Pokemon image of type URL. Or of type
Close.
string.
Remember, this has to match it exactly. Right? Like whatever the key value is, our struct needs to match it exactly.
So do you have to create an enum to get that raw value out?
We can. I'm going to show you guys a shortcut, actually. That's going to make your life a little easier. So if we want to use the front default one, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do normal Swift style. I'm just going to say front default. And this looks like it's a string. It is a string. This is a string. But for the sake of what we're going to do in a second, I'm going to call this a URL. Because that's where like the photo lives. That's where the actual sprite image lives. Is that a URL? So if I run this right now, can someone tell me why I'm not going to get the sprite?
Well, on the image.
It's camel case rather than the underscore.
Exactly. It's like the same circumstance we were facing before where like the capital letter was throwing off our endpoint. If we have the wrong key value, we won't get the right information from that key. So Java and like a lot of web program languages, they're going to use this snake case. We use camel case in Swift, just the way we do it. So this isn't going to be the same value. But I'm going to show you guys a cool little shortcut. So just like whenever you run into this problem and you don't want to make enums, because you might end up making like tons and tons of enums, which is just a super pain. What you're going to do instead is come into your networking method. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to have to kind of like fix this a little bit because I don't want all this messy code to be here. So on line 29, I want you to make a space. And it might not be line 29, depending on what you've done, but make a space after your do. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to say, let decoder be our JSON decoder. And we'll fix this here in a second. And then there's this cool thing that JSON decoders have. So what it is it's called a data decoding strategy. And basically what it does is it's going to take whatever you've used as your model and whatever the key value is and do something differently depending on if there's a confliction. So the data decoding strategy we can use here is called convert. Where is it? I know it's in here. Sorry. Oh, sorry. It's called key decoding strategy. I got that wrong. Sorry. So it's a key decoding strategy. So it says a value that determines how a type's coding keys are decoded from JSON keys. And then we're going to say convert from snake case. So what it does is a key decoding strategy that converts snake case keys to camel case keys. So what's sort of magically happening here is when this JSON is being decoded, we're going to take this front underscore default and it's going to turn it into Swift for us by saying front capital default. Is everybody with me so far? That makes sense? This is just like a cool thing that will just like save you some time so you don't have to go in and make enums. Because if literally every single JSON key that you're trying to decode has an underscore, that's like an enum for every little thing. You're going to have to make a raw value of that enum for every single one. Whereas this one's going to be like quick for you. Our model object can keep this front default, and then this strategy will turn it into snake case for us. So we already made our JSON decoder, so I'm going to turn this into our decoder. So we just made like a short little modification just to make sure that we get that sprite. Does that make sense to everybody? Are we all kind of still with it here? And did that go over anybody's head? Because I can talk through it again if you want. We're good? Okay. So if everything works now, what we should expect here is what? We should get a Pokemon name, ID, and what?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what's up?
And image, but so the way that the snake case decoder thing works, you don't even have to tell it the specific thing that you want to decode. It just knows that somewhere in this Pokemon, somewhere in the Pokemon variable, there's a property that might be snake case, and it knows, like, it just automatically.
Yeah, let's say there's a property called first name. So like on the JSON, it looks like this, and in your model, it looks like this. What this snake case is going to do is it doesn't care about what the actual inside is. It's just going to say, I want that. And then instead of doing an underscore, I'm just going to capitalize what's right after the underscore. That's all that's happening there.
It's grabbing it from the JSON.
Yep, it's getting it because our JSON data is coming through the closure. So it's being passed through the closure. And then this is the strategy that we've set up for the decoder to do. So then when that data gets passed in here, when we try to finally decode it, it knows, hey, if there is any sort of key that has an underscore, just get rid of the underscore and capitalize the next character. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool little trick, just like one thing to like make your life easier. We did go over on Tuesday how to like do those enums and set them up to match with different cases, but this is just kind of a shorthand way of doing it. Okay, so like I said, what can we expect now to get out of this? When we search for a Pokemon, what should we expect to be printed out here in the console?
We want our image, right?
Yep.
But don't we have to do something for that?
Well, I mean, just like programmatically, what are we going to get?
It'll give you a sprite.
Yeah.
A sprite, but look at what type our sprite is, because like we made a sprite struct, but what we're actually expecting to get back is just a URL.
Yeah, URL.
So let's go ahead and run it. And what I'm hoping to see here is we see Pokemon name, so the actual string of the name, the ID, which is an int, and then some sort of indication that we got a URL, which is going to look like a string. And I'll tell you guys why the URL is going to work a little bit better for us. Okay. Sorry that this is like taking a while. I hope that this is helpful for you guys.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So someone give me a Pokemon.
Squirtle.
Okay. Now we come down here and we see we got Squirtle's name. We got his ID. It's gender neutral. There can be female Squirtles too. And then we got the sprite, which is kind of nested, right? Because in the JSON, it lives inside of a dictionary, the dictionary of URLs. And then we got this front default, and look, it decoded it just fine. So if I went back and I got rid of this decoding strategy, I'll show you guys why when this won't work. So if I get rid of this decoding strategy, now I'm going to run it. Squirtle is not going to get. In fact, our whole JSON is going to collapse actually, because that's the key thing. Like that's why a lot of you guys were running into problems yesterday. If there's even one element wrong in your model, the JSON will not be able to turn it into it.
So you don't have to convert that URL to an image like we did in the animal spotter?
We will. We just want to make sure that we get it into our project first. So now look, like key not found, string value, front defaults. Like this is a really good indicative method, like message for us. It's like, hey, this key was wrong. The stuff that's in here is wrong and incorrect because we got rid of this converting strategy. Like I hope that this like preaches to you guys the importance of getting your strings correct, just like your nomenclature is so important of things. So we run it again, and it's going to take a little bit. And I'll put Jigglypuff in. And now we got it. So it's like, that was critical, right? Just making sure we're decoding it properly. So again, I'm going to say this 1,000 more times, but like start small with your models. Build one layer of your model, just like a name. Make sure your network method fires and works, and then you can go in and add things individually and just make sure that they work as you go. That'll just save you time. It'll save you grief. Okay, so now, like Austin was saying, how do we turn this URL into be an actual image? Because what we can expect is, if I copy and paste this and put it in a web browser, and it didn't really work earlier for some dumb reason, but I know that for sure this will turn into a picture for us if we set it up the right way. So first thing, how do I show an image? What do I need to show an image?
Image view.
Yep. Image view. Bring this guy out. Rainbow wheel. There we go. And then, sorry, I'm like off to the side here a bit. I'm just going to make this a perfect square, just so it looks like clean and sharp. So I'll just do like 150 for both. Probably good. We can modify and alter it later. The other thing I'm going to do is, you know what? I do want it bigger because I feel like the resolution is still going to be like kind of 8-bit, and that's totally fine. Let's do, you know what? We don't even need to pin it right away because we're going to add other stuff into a stack view, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. We're just going to leave it where it is. And then let's go ahead and make the outlet. There's a lot going on, sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to drag, call it image view. Everybody good so far? Okay. And then, oh, we never put this into a folder, and my OCD is firing right now. Model controller. Cool. This guy right there. And this is just the OCD in me that's like, hey, your model needs to be at the top, and then I just follow this pattern every time. I'm crazy. Okay. Let's go in here. We did this on Thursday, if you guys were here for our random users, but how do we take a URL and make it become an image?
We gotta do like, what was it? I just had it. Like image data.
Yeah.
And then we have to
Keep
take
going,
that.
sorry.
Can we like try? I think we did.
Yes, we did do a try.
Yeah.
There's a method that we used to make. We took it from, we did a double conversion actually. This isn't always best practice. I'll tell you guys this. Later on when we talk about concurrency, you're not going to want to do images like this when you're loading a lot. Just because we're doing one right now, I think it's going to be fine. But later down the road, I don't recommend doing this for a lot of things. This is just like to get one image to load for you. This is a really just like quick, good, safe way to do it. So I'm going to do guard let Pokemon image data equal. And then you guys were right. We did some sort of try method. Do you guys remember what that try method was?
You do a data parentheses contents of
Data. And then we're going to try to find the
URL.
Yep. So there's a method called contents of URL. So basically what this is doing is it's just saying like, hey, I'm going to give you a website and I want you to kind of in a roundabout way, just like download what's at that website. So we're going to say, and this needs to be an optional value, sorry. Because it's just like, hey, if it's there, let's try it. We could do a bang too, but that would be sketchy. So I'm just going to do an optional try. And then what's the URL that we're trying to get information from? What do we need to put in here?
We want to use our sprite.
Sweet. How do we get to our sprite?
Wouldn't it be Pokemon dot sprite or sprites? I don't remember what we named it.
Yeah, so it's sprites. And then is that it? Is that all we're doing?
No, then we do dot sprite.
Dot front default, right? That's the one that we.
Or yeah.
So there's our front default. Okay, so ideally, oh, we need to make it else because we, got to return if that doesn't work for us. Okay, so now we've got some image data. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to convert it because now this is of type data. There's not a good way to take something from a URL and make it magically into an image. It just doesn't work. But data is a really malleable type. So if we can make things into data, we can do a lot of things with them. We'll use it a lot. So now what we're going to do instead is we're going to say, so our image view. Do you guys remember the kind of like the real world example I made for image views? Like what they represent, kind of? Anybody?
You said something about bug protection.
Yeah, that's like a, well, that's kind of a different thing, but I guess you could use it in the same way. It's like a picture frame. So our image view that we dragged out into the storyboard kind of acts as a picture frame, but there's not actually a picture in it yet. We haven't put a picture inside because all image views, just like all picture frames should, have a image property. Because this is just of type UI image view. Just the picture frame, but this is the actual image type that needs to be inside of it. So we're going to set that image equal to, and then now what we can do is we're going to take our data and turn it into a UI image. Does anyone know how to do that?
Don't you just hit Pokemon image data?
This is why like trying to write it out helps a lot because you'll just kind of see why things work and why things don't.
You also have to convert it from a data to an image.
Exactly. So, types are so critical. Type congruency is just like Swift is just so reliant on types being the same for just safety purposes. So this is a data, this is an image. Does anyone know how I might go about turning a data source into an image?
Type in UI image, then open parentheses.
Cool. There's a bunch of initializers here. This one is the one we're going for. So if we pass in data, it'll return an image based on what that data was. So if we cross our fingers and everything works the way it's supposed to, what should we expect to see when we hit that enter when we search a Pokemon?
A picture.
Yeah. And we did a double conversion of these two lines. There's a lot going on here. We took it from a URL, turned it into data, and then turned that data into a picture. There we go. So we saw on the JSON that it looked like a string. I like, whenever I do this conversion, I just like to use URLs for it because I think the URLs just do it quicker. There's a quicker way. Spencer gave you guys like a fetch image method. Later down the road, you're going to want to rely on a separate method to get those image calls because like in concurrency, there's a lot happening in your app. The last thing that you want is for the top layer, like your main thread, to be fetching images. It's just going to slow your app down a ton. You guys probably saw, but like this took a while to load, right? So later down the road, we're going to learn methods that kind of just like make it easier for us. It'll be easier for us to go about it, doing like things on a different thread, like behind the scenes kind of. So this isn't like the method to convert images. So I don't want you guys to get like hell bent on using this forever. It's just a quick and basic way to do it. What questions do you guys have about what we just did?
I was asking if we should make a commit.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Done.
Well, I do have one thing I noticed. This time when you did an else return, but on Thursday you actually showed us like the fatal error way. Which one's actually better? Because fatal error sounds kind of scary.
Fatal error is sketch. Fatal error is just like, it's your all case, just way to ensure that you're passing in the right parameter. So it's like, if you want to indicate that something failed, I can't remember why the actual error was happening. Oh, it was because we were doing it in a cell. We were doing it in a basic cell on Thursday night. And basically, cells themselves, if you can't get whatever you're asking it to be, it will ask for a return type. And what that one needed was an actual image. And so we didn't have a default image to give it. So we just did fatal error, which is like not great practice, but for the sake of what we were doing on Thursday night, it was fine for us. If you guys want to stick around later today, we can definitely go in and put in our table view. When we go back here and we saved our Pokemon, we could totally have an image of the Pokemon right here, and you'll see why we have to use fatal error there. It's because the cell is expecting an image if we ask it to populate with one. Okay, cool. So we have two options here. So one, we can work on the other aspect where we append the Pokemon to a table view, or two, we can continue working in this detail view and flesh out the rest of what goes in here. What do you guys think would be best?
I don't mind creating a save, like fleshing out the rest that's in here if everyone else doesn't.
Yeah. So you want to work on the rest of this right now?
Yeah, like the save button especially.
So save, okay, let's do this. We'll do the save button. We'll make sure it saves into a table view. And then I think I might have you guys practice the rest on your own, because that's like pretty much the majority of MVP is like once we hit the save button and it loads in here, like that's almost everything.
My power's going out. It's kind of trippy.
Oh, you're good. Okay, let's go ahead and do a save button. So for the sake of time and ease, we've got a nav bar here. I'm just going to put the button up top, and it's going to be a bar button item. So I'll throw that guy in there. And then there's a system item for it of save. We'll go ahead and link that guy up. Whoops. And then, okay, who wants to tell me if this should be an action or an outlet? An outlet.
An action?
What do you guys think?
Yeah, action.
Definitely an action. We're actually going to do both, and I'll show you why in a second. But yeah, action for sure. We're definitely going to need the action. I'm just going to put it down a little bit lower. I kind of like to code things out how they're like chronologically going to happen in the app. So I'm just call this save button pressed. So, you know, we expect that like the view is going to load first, then the user is going to search something, then things are going to change on the view, and then they're going to save. So that's just kind of how I like to set it up. I'll show you why in a second, but we're going to make also an outlet. So make an outlet from the save button. Whoa, this is flying everywhere. Make an outlet from the save button. What? Why? There we go. So make an outlet from the save button into that file as well. Okay, so I will show you guys why we're going to do that very first. Actually, if someone wants to tell me why they think I made an outlet for this, what do you think?
We could update it to where it says saved, to where we know it's already saved.
Yeah, it already says save, and like ideally when they hit the save button, it will just, this view will go away.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the Pokemon hasn't loaded yet, do we want them to be able to save something that's not even there?
Oh no. So then we would wait till it loads in.
Yes. So that's that's a really cool, easy way to just like update. As soon as we get some like information about this, we can make sure that this save button is shown. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make a separate method because we're getting like pretty deep here. I'm going to make a hide views method because there are certain things that we don't want to show until a Pokemon loads. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to say save button. And then I don't know if you guys have seen this property before, but there's an is hidden. And it's not populating for whatever dumb reason. Oh, maybe we can't do it in a bar button. Huh. Save button dot text color. Oh, it's not gonna work because of that. That's annoying. I had this great big plan to do this cool thing with you guys, and it's not gonna work. Save button dot. So this is the fun part about programming, is when things don't work like you think they will, and you have to just like scroll through them and see if there's something that will. Yeah, maybe we don't want to use a save button per se like this. You know what? Let's do this. First, just for this sake, let's do save button enabled is false, because this will just mean that like the user can't save something that doesn't exist. And then when we update views after the Pokemon has loaded, we can say save button dot is enabled. This is kind of redundant to say is true, but it'll just know that if we just put is enabled.
You could probably try, in terms of that save button, you could probably try navigation item dot something. Maybe you would be able to hide it from there, but I guess that would be more time.
Back bar button item. Right bar button item. Oh, that might work.
Maybe bar. Okay.
Right bar button item dot is hidden. It still doesn't have an is hidden. It's a bummer. Well,
See if there's something that says.
What were you gonna say? Navigation item dot bar button item. Hide search bar when scrolling. Nah. Well, not super critical, but I mean that's news to me that you can't hide a bar. I'm sure you can hide it, but I don't know right off the top of my head how. At least we know now, like if the user wants to save something, they can't actually save it until the Pokemon is loaded. Okay. Just for the sake of the button itself, when it hits save, we're gonna perform some code and it's gonna actually add it to the array. But as far as what the view looks like, what sort of what do we want to happen after they've hit save?
Dismiss.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to do pop just because I am a fan of pop. So we're just going to say navigation controller dot pop. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pop. Both of these will do the same thing. I'm going to do pop to root view controller. And then this one's going to be true.
I forgot what the pop was.
Pop just means pop back, like go back to.
Oh, gotcha. And then what's the difference between that and dismiss?
Dismiss is the same. Dismiss, I think you can use it just fine, but I use it for modal segues more.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think dismiss should still not be an issue. It's more of just like modal transitions, I think, work with dismiss. So now, this save button shouldn't work unless there's a Pokemon loaded. So what we can say is make sure we load a Pokemon and save it, and it'll dismiss back. But now if we came in, oh, it's still going to work. That's a bummer. Well, I guess it's enabled no matter what. Anyways, what we've learned here is the bar button item is not the way to go, which is fine. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how we want to save this into our table view controller. Just as far as the data source method goes, let's pop back to our team table view controller, Pokemon team table view controller. Okay. We've done this a bunch, but how should we approach setting up these table views, number of rows, and sections?
So you need to create the API controller in this file. So let API controller or Pokemon controller, whatever you have it called.
And we'll talk a little bit about like why this isn't going to work here in just a sec. But yeah, you're on the right track. I mean that like these are correct. Now that we've created this separate Pokemon controller, this one is different from it. So this is going to be invalid. But it'll be an easy fix. We'll be able to fix it here in a sec. Okay.
And then delete the number of sections.
Yeah, I already deleted that one. So now we've, oh, sorry, you're right. Just kidding. So we'll get rid of that one. And then what do we want for our number of rows in section?
And then return API controller Pokemon controller dot Pokemon dot count.
Okay, I don't have anything, right? So what we need to do now is we've got to come back to our model controller, and we need to give these Pokemon a place to live locally in our array. So I'm actually just going to come up here, and I'm just going to say var Pokemon team. It's pretty indicative of what it is, of an array of Pokemon, and it's going to be defaulted to empty at first. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So let's go back. So we've got our Pokemon controller, and now we should have a Pokemon, sorry, what did I call it? Team? Oh, it needs to build. That's why. Dot Pokemon team. And then what else do we want to return here? Just that? Dot count. Yep, we need to return integers. It's expecting an integer. Okay, and then let's go ahead and configure the cell. First off, what did we name our Pokemon cell? Well, that's what we named it. I kind of ruined that for you. Pokemon cell. If you ever need to check, just go back. Good practice is probably just to copy and paste exactly what you wrote. That way you don't make a mistake. So it's Pokemon cell right there. Let's make our cell basic. You guys know how I feel about basic cells. Okay, cool. How should I go about setting up the cell?
Let cell, or guard let cell, I guess you could say.
We already got a cell. We don't need to make one. After we declare a cell, we always have to declare the thing that's going to live inside of it, right?
So Pokemon?
Yep. Let Pokemon equal, and then what is it going to equal?
I guess Pokemon controller.
Let's redo the segue.destination.
No, because this is a cell. This isn't a segue.
And then do index path. That would
Okay. So that means wherever the Pokemon lives in the array, put them with the accompanying row. So it's saying if, you know, the Pokemon is the first in the index, or I'm sorry, the first in the array, put it in the first row. That's what's happening here. Okay. And then if I wanted to, because we've got some data, right? We've got some information about the Pokemon now. Let's just show off the name. So how do I put the name into the cell?
Cell dot title label or text label, whatever it's.
Text label. Nice. Just text label?
dot or question mark dot.
Yeah, it'll probably it'll always pre-populate for you if you just hit enter. Optionals are fun. Okay, so we've got the text label, and then we want to put the Pokemon's name into the text label.
Pokemon.name.
Yep. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and build. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and run. We'll see. I'm going to tell you right away. I'll be shocked if it actually works. It's not going to work. 99% sure it's not going to work. Let's do Ampharos. We actually haven't even made the method work yet, so that's also why it's not going to work. So how do there are actually two things why it's not going to work right now. How do we get the Pokemon that we've searched to get inside of this array of Pokemon?
Well, for starters, you can tell your update views you can tell your update views to actually reload your table view data.
That's not going to work from inside of here because this is a UI view controller. But you're right, we can come in here and ask whenever the view loads that the table view also reloads again.
How about implementing a delegate?
We could do a delegate. It's going to take more time, more effort. There's an easier way to do it.
Can't you put it in the do?
Sorry, what did you say?
Couldn't you make add it to your do in the controller?
That's one way.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
So what's the difference between view will appear and view did load?
View will appear is the moment right before the view appears. View did load is the moment after the view has loaded. So in the space of time, they're like milliseconds different, but there might be different things that you want to accomplish before the view has appeared and after the view has appeared.
So maybe you should tell it to reload the data when the view will appear.
Sure, we could do that. I'm just going to say view will appear. Oops, that's the wrong one. View will appear. And then we'll say, we always have to call super because the same thing with view did load. It's just an override method. We'll say view will appear. And then I'm just going to do that. And then, yeah, table view dot reload data. Okay, so that'll work. But right now, like in this view controller, I guess I should show you on the simulator. Like when we come here, we enter in a Pokemon name. We get the Pokemon. We hit save, but all it's doing is just going back to the previous view. So what are we missing?
So we actually have to set up basically tell it to add it to the array that you just set up.
Exactly. How do I go about doing that, Mark?
Maybe in the save function, you can actually add, I guess, a couple properties.
Sure. Let's take it one step further. We talked about CRUD methods before, right? Where like create, delete kind of things. We've talked about them. Let's go, because our model controller is where it's supposed to take care of anything that has to do with our model, right? Like this here, we've talked about MVC before, but like MVC is for separating things into what they do. So like our model is the template for all the building blocks of our app. The controller manages all of those models. And then these are view controllers that display the data. They display the information. So we want to not like leave the work of creating inside a view. We want to let our controller take care of it for us. So let's make a create I'll actually call it this. Let's say func add Pokemon. Okay. Now, this function, is this going to work for us if I just do like?
You should put a Pokemon parameter.
Yes.
That takes a type.
That's exactly what I was looking for. We want to pass in a Pokemon that it can use. Okay. So then what we'll say is, as long as there's a Pokemon, let's go ahead and add it to our Pokemon team. How do I add it to our Pokemon team?
So you can say Pokemon team dot append dot, append in a parentheses Pokemon.
Exactly. And what that will do is that should, if there is a Pokemon, add it to this array. So we've got the method now that we can access. Let's go back to the save button. And what we'll do here is we'll say, all right, first off, in this view, let's make sure there's a Pokemon. Otherwise, like, there's no point saving it if it doesn't exist, right? And then how do I access that method?
You call it?
You call the function.
Can I just call
the API controller, call the function?
Yeah.
You got to call where it lives, right? It's from the Pokemon controller. Dot. It's not there yet because we have to build. So if you guys ever run into that where things aren't showing up, just hit Command B. Let the app build, especially if like you're doing like what I am. I'm recording all this, so it's struggling. Oh, this needs a little thing right here. View will appear. It needs to have a parameter for animated, and then we pass in the value of it being true. What is being done? Animated. Oh, just that. We just have to write animated. So if you guys missed that, view did load is a little different in that view will appear needs like this animated parameter to be passed in. Okay. Let's go back to the search. Okay, so we're saying, hey, if we got a Pokemon, let's use the method inside of our Pokemon controller, add our Pokemon, and what is the parameter we're passing in here?
Pokemon.
Yep. And then just for the sake of like it being easier for you guys to see, we can just write like Pokemon to be saved, right? Like there's some congruency between which variable or which property we're talking about.
So right now it's only in the array, right? It hasn't gone into the table view cell yet, right?
Correct. Okay. But it should, we should have access to that array already. So this is not going to work. We've set it up really well, and you guys have done an excellent job, but there's like a really critical thing that I want to like dawn for you right now of why it's not going to work. I also have to pee, so we need to take a break. But let's go ahead and save a Pokemon. So let's do, oh man, let's do Caterpie. So when I hit this save, I will be shocked if it works. There's no way it's going to. This save is going to dismiss back to the table view, but there is not going to be anything that shows in the table view. Even though we've set things up to do it that way, it's not going to. So, and like I said, guys, if you ever need to go, you're welcome to. This isn't like a mandatory thing, but I'm going to take a brief break. I want you guys to try and look through, even talk together about why, and I think, Will, this is a big problem that you were facing yesterday. Talk together about why this Pokemon that we should be saving, when we search it on here, why it's not coming back to the table view. So take a little bit, couple minutes. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in a bit.
What do you think it is, William?
I totally forgot. I did so many things after this that I totally forgot what I did there.
Was an update views or do we
I
put that
thought,
in?
yeah, it might be an update views.
Did
I
we
thought it
create
was.
a Pokemon variable here?
Oh, you know what? I think it's the passing of controllers and information between two files. I think it's something to do with that, but I could be wrong.
Well, did we create? Do you know if we created a Pokemon variable on this page? Like outside, like
I don't remember.
because we need to create a Pokemon variable with like that's optional, and then like I don't know if we set up like a did set. Do you happen to remember?
Yeah, we need a did set for sure.
Because I think the job of did set is to find out if there's anything like isn't it an observer, so it like finds out if there's anything that.
So if it was set, then it will add, and then you update views.
Yeah.
And then I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
and
that's
then, it. Okay.
And it's like the segue thing too. I think we need to pass like a controller and a Pokemon array in between the files. I don't think we've done that yet, unless you guys have.
Because I know on the other file we used, did we use a did set? The Pokemon controller? No.
Did you guys already do segues? You remember, Donovan?
We set up the names for them, but I think we're about to do that in here.
I think that's going to actually make all the information match so that when you are appending, it's going to the exact same one that you want to go. It's going to populate. So I think that's what's wrong.
Like what? Segue.identifier.
Yeah, I don't think I set one up, and I still managed to actually get the app running.
Oh, you didn't need a segue?
I can't find it. I'm like going through all my code. I'm having trouble finding it.
There's another way to do that too. Somebody else is doing that as well. I don't know how to. I got it so that I didn't need to use the save button, and it would auto-populate the table view.
Yeah, the only segue I have is from the search button. I just call it add Pokemon segue.
Yeah, I don't have one at all.
I don't know if you need a segue for a search, because the search will take you. Oh, never mind. How did you get to your search? Like when you click on your search item in the table view cell, does it take you to that other page without that segue?
So I created a segue like through the storyboard, but I'm not really finding any segue in my in my code. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
bugging.
we haven't done that, I don't think, yet.
All right, guys. I like what I'm hearing a little bit. You guys are definitely on the right track. Did we have like a consensus of maybe why? I was hearing like some segue stuff, but like, why isn't this working, do you think?
I think we think it. Oh, sorry.
Well, we don't have a Pokemon variable on this page.
True, but we shouldn't need one because the array, all we need is the array. And all we had to do is just access that array via this declaration of our model controller.
Well, do we need to actually set up a did set to kind of like watch out to see if anything changes?
You're on the right track, I would say. You're definitely getting on the right track.
Are we going to use that segue identifier we made from the search?
Yeah, okay, you guys are on the right track. We definitely need to be passing information from one place to the next. So this is called dependency injection. So the real issue with this is line 13, we made an instance of our Pokemon controller, right? 'Cause this is just a blueprint. This isn't actually like a thing until we make it a thing by declaring it. Right now it can actually do stuff. But the problem is here we did the same thing, right?
But they're two different controllers.
Yes, we've got two controllers going on at the same time. Now, what we want is we want to inject dependency onto a view, but the problem is we've got this this model controller is running the network call. This is firing the network call. But this model controller is doing something totally different in just setting up the table view. It's not actually getting any information from the network call. Because like this guy, all he's doing is he's setting up these table view data sources. But this guy is firing the search button. He is calling for the network method to search for Pokemon. He's, helping out with making the Pokemon be saved, but they're being saved to an array that only exists in here. It's not the array that we're trying to get in here. Do you guys see that? They're two separate controllers. So does anyone know a way that we can fix that?
Prepare a segue?
Yes.
And it pass the controller?
Yes, exactly. So let's go ahead and do that. The problem is right now, this is a let. So we can't really inject any different, we can't send mail to this because it's closed off. It's a let constant. How do we adjust this so that it can receive something?
Var.
Yes. So what we're going to do instead, we're going to say var Pokemon controller, which is of type Pokemon controller. And we're going to make this an optional value. Now, as soon as you do this, a bunch of errors are going to fire off. I guess not a bunch, just a couple. And what that means is in this file, we're calling this Pokemon controller, but the problem is it might not actually exist, right? It's not actually a thing yet. So what we have to do is we just have to give it the optional type in the both representations of where we used it. So we used it up here to search, and then we used it down here to add Pokemon. So all we did was we just made it optional so that it can become the one from before. So rather than this being its own model controller, the goal is to take the one that we declared here and put it into this.
So I'm getting errors for some reason, and I did the exact same thing. Pokemon controller type Pokemon saying cannot use optional changing, non-optional changing value of type Pokemon controller.
Did you put question marks after the Pokemon controller?
Yes.
And you're still getting errors?
Yeah, and you have above your did set, you have var Pokemon controller equals Pokemon controller. Oh, of type.
Equals of type, yeah. It doesn't actually, it's not actually existing yet. Are you guys seeing kind of why this is important? We can't have two controllers doing separate things. We have to have one universal controller doing everything for us. And you guys were right. We totally could have used a delegate. I think just for the sake of simplicity that this will work a little bit better for us. But yeah, this is kind of the path that we have to follow for this.
So I just realized I never did a segue.
Yeah, we never made one. We haven't made one yet.
Yeah, I just realized I never made a segue, and I've actually been passing the information.
What do you mean?
My app runs, but I don't think I ever made a segue. I didn't make a segue that actually says if this is the segue identifier, go to this page. If this is a segue identifier, go to that page.
Interesting. Maybe I want to see that later, Mark, to see what you did, because maybe you indirectly use a delegate or something, possibly. Interesting. Okay. Well, what we're gonna do now is we are gonna take this Pokemon controller and we are going to send it to the Pokemon search view controller. So whenever we start making these segue methods, what should we start with?
Guardlet.
We do need to do a guardlet, but like first we need to just check that it's the right segue.
If segue.identifier is equal to the identifier that we have set in quotation.
And I think I called it search Pokemon. Let's go back and check. Just always go back and check to be safe. Add Pokemon. We called it add Pokemon. I'm going to change it to search Pokemon just because that does a better job for it. So now this segue is called search Pokemon. And then, oh, you did have a segue, Mark? Because I was like, I don't know how he would have done it without a segue. I meant, like, we could use notification pattern or we could use delegates, but we haven't even touched a lot of that yet, so I would have been way impressed with you. Okay, so if the segue is search Pokemon, now what kind of what do we want to do? What do we want to do if that's the right segue? Someone said something about guardlet. You're definitely on the right track.
Guardlet search VC equals.
Okay. Search VC equals what?
Segue destination as.
Yep.
Search our Pokemon search view controller.
And we're going to downcast this, optional downcasting. And we're going to call this, well, it's not, it's already called. We've already made this custom file, right? So it's Pokemon search view controller. And then if that's wrong, we'll just return, right? So all we did here is we said, we gave a constant value to the place where we're trying to send this. So this is like the address. Now we got to send something, right? So what are we sending? Or what are we, what is the receiver going to get?
Should be search VC dot Pokemon.
Are we sending a Pokemon or are we sending a Pokemon controller?
A Pokemon controller.
Yes. Why are we doing that, Austin? Why are we doing a Pokemon controller rather than a Pokemon?
Because this whole segue is to send the API controller or the Pokemon controller.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're not, in this table view, we're not getting any information about Pokemon. We're relying on the search method to get it for us and then append it and put it back in the array. So we're going to have so this is our Pokemon controller up here. We're going to send it to that search view controller. Oh, shoot. That search view controller's Pokemon controller.
Is it also because the Pokemon's inside of that controller? Like
what do you mean?
Your Pokemon arrays inside of the Pokemon controller?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to even touch the array until it like appends, right? Like the array is not going to show up until in the search view controller we finally like save it.
Oh, I see. So the Pokemon you're referring to is the single instance of it. Okay, got it.
Okay, so if everything works out the way it's supposed to, what we can expect now, we have one singular model controller, which means we'll have one array, not two. We'll have one array. So what we're going to do is we'll come to the table view and it's going to, fire this off and say, how many should you have? And it's going to say 0 because we don't have any Pokemon in the array yet. And it's going to say, what should we put in the cell? And it's going to have no information because there's no Pokemon yet. So it's just going to say, hey, when you search for a Pokemon, right, like when you tap this and it says search Pokemon segue, then this Pokemon controller that exists in here is going to exist here. It's going to come up here now. This Pokemon controller will then become the one that we already made. Is that messy for anybody, or does that make sense? Making sense to everybody? Okay, cool. All right, so if everything works, fingers crossed, everything will work out the way it's supposed to. When we hit this add Pokemon, it'll take the Pokemon that we saved and it will go ahead and take care of that for us. Fingers crossed. This is always a gamble for me too when I'm like doing segues and passing controllers. Sometimes some things don't work the way you want them to, and it can be a gamble. Let's do Charmander. So we're hoping that when we hit the save button, the Pokemon that's here will get appended back into the initial array, and then the table view will be smart enough to save Charmander. Does that make sense how that all happened? I know it was a lot. If
Where?
Sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
Sorry. Where is the code that you set the title to be the Pokemon name? Because I think I put mine in the wrong place.
Oh, you're good. It's just right here in update views. So we called an update views method, and I just said, hey, the title of the navigation bar should be the Pokemon's name capitalized, and then a space, and then it's going to say ID, and then the Pokemon's ID.
Okay.
Nothing too wild. Okay, so we saw here, this doesn't look super great, right? Because like Charmander is a lowercase, so let's go fix that. And that's an easy fix, right? We just do capitalized. So now this is an excellent time to make a commit because we did what we needed to do, right? The network call fires, loads Pokemon info, displays it in the detail. We can hit save if we want it, and it comes back to the table view. So I'm going to commit really quick. I'm just going to say configure table view, data source methods, and prepare for segue, because that's what we did. And if your commits aren't identical to mine, that's fine. It's just kind of like, it's just good to be descriptive of what you did during your segue or during your commit.
Is there any way you can show us that that thumbnail image for on the table view cell, that each cell has its own little tiny image, like in a random?
Let's do that right now. Let's do it right now. So it's like kind of like copy paste, right? Because we already did it. So this guard let Pokemon image data. Let's just let's copy this from our detail, because this is our conversion, right? We're taking the URL, making it data. So let's take that guy and put it back in our table view. So I'm just going to put it in the cell. So there's a Pokemon here. What's happening? Oh, okay, Mark, this is where it comes up. So before, we were fine to just return, but now because it's a cell, we have to do fatal error. I mean, there's better ways to do it, but I'm just going to do a fatal error because for the interest of time. But the cell is asking for, oh, don't be dumb. Oh, it's not returning, it's just a fatal error. The cell is asking for something to be back. It's like, if you don't give me data, I need something to use. And we don't really have a something to give it, so we're just going to do fatal error. Don't quote me on that being a good programming decision. We're just going to do it for the sake of time.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Okay. All right. And then, like I said, guys, basic cells, all of them have a property that is an image view. We can get inside of that picture frame, that image view, and we can set it equal to the UI image. Use that data, and then we'll pass in the Pokemon image data. I'm going to hit build. It's going to take a little while. Okay. And then let's go ahead and run it now. So what you can expect now is when we save Charmander, we're going to see his name capitalized in the table view, and we will also see the sprite next to him, which is really fun. Cute.
So my even after I put the title in the update views, the title doesn't change. Would there be another reason?
Do you have a title to start with? Because like
yes,
right now, you guys search for a Pokemon.
Yeah, it's a basic cell, right? So it comes with a title, right?
Are you talking about your detail view or your table view?
Oh, table view, like the table view itself.
Yeah, I don't actually have a title in my table view. The title that's being changed is in your detail view.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So how do you get Charmander to show in your table view?
What do you mean?
Like the Squirtle and the Charmander there? Isn't that the title?
So you mean in your table view right here, or are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, the table view.
Because we've configured the cell, right? We've got a Pokemon array to choose from. There's Pokemon that live there, and then we just said cell.label.text.
Yeah, I did that, but it doesn't configure the name in the cell. Kind of strange.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah, but I can figure it out later.
Okay, once we're done with this, I'll hop in and help you out with that, because we're pretty much at a point where like you guys should be able to complete the rest of MVP with like what we've done here. If you're not, I'm gonna be sad because we literally spent 3 hours doing it. So, anyways, okay, sweet. Let's well, that was fun. I want to keep like putting stuff in here. So let's like make a full team so you guys can see what it does. Let's put Bulbasaur in. Save Bulbasaur. And then let's put a Pikachu because it's might as well be on brand here. Got our Pikachu. Okay, so the last part of your MVP is, you know, you guys should be able to select one of the cells and then pull up to another view where you see more information about the Pokemon. Because like we can go back into the search, but the info's gone now. It's like ready to look for a new Pokemon. So part of your MVP is clicking on this and transitioning to a new view where you get to see more information about the Pokemon. So we're not going to do it. Maybe we can, but I'm like, this is a long Zoom, and I feel bad that I've take so much of your guys' time today. But could anyone like just talk me through how you would approach taking care of the rest of that?
On the storyboard, you'd have to obviously add a new view controller, and that would be like the detail view controller, and sync all that up. And then make a segue from the table view cell to that detail view controller that you just made.
Yep. And then you'll configure that view a lot like the one that we made here. It won't have a search bar. It won't have a save button. The title will just be automatically the Pokemon's name. So it's going to look a little bit different. But yeah, like generally, it's going to follow that kind of same pattern. So hopefully that means that you guys have a really good idea of how you want to tackle the rest of it. It really shouldn't be super hard. It's just going to, you know, there's going to be a little bit of difference to it. For example, like in your segue, you're not going to just be passing a Pokemon to the next view. You're going to have to do like index path for selected row. We've done that a couple of times. We did that on Thursday night. It's like, can you guys see why like I did the project on Thursday night the way that I did it? Does that make sense? Because I set it up so that you guys could like succeed yesterday. I know that it was hard with networking, but hopefully you can see like I'm on your team and I want you guys to do well, and that's why I do those Thursday things the way that I did. Okay. You guys feel better about this sprint challenge now?
Definitely.
Like if you had to make it from scratch and maybe try to not look at my code that we've done together here, do you feel like you could do it?
No, but I do feel like I've learned like 40 to 50%. Like I feel like I've learned a lot more, but I just don't have it in memory.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
it's just about like getting reps in, like you said. Like just practice makes perfect. Like you're gonna be a good programmer if you practice. You're gonna be a great programmer if you practice and you make it fun and like do it in your off time. Do it in the evenings after class. Do it on the weekends. One fun thing that I do to practice networking is I just find cool APIs and I just like do what we did here and just try to like pull information and parse JSON and display cool things. Find APIs that are of interest to you. Like if you like to cook, or if you like looking at countries, or if you like to travel, find an API that will give you some cool JSON data, and then see what you can do to parse that out. Yeah, generally, like, I didn't want to do the whole app start to finish with you guys because that's like ruins the purpose. So there's still like a couple of unfinished things, right? Like we still didn't take care of the abilities and the type. Like those don't display yet. You're gonna have to go back in and redo that. But generally, we've taken care of the bulk of it here. So with that, you guys have just the assignment to finish. Like you just need to finish out the rest of it.
You could technically just put all the other stuff in the update views, right?
Yeah,
and
that's all I would do. Is I would just go back to the update views. You know, obviously you're going to have to reconfigure your model to add in the abilities and the types, and then you'll just come into your update views and just make sure that those are displayed. You'll have to add labels and things, but you'll have to just make sure that those display. But like we've set it up in a way that like those should be pretty quick and easy to add. So I will say this, there are more than one ability for each Pokemon. There are more than one type for some Pokemon, so you're going to have to account for those. But generally, we're on the right track to do that here. So anyways, dang, we did a lot. You guys, thanks for sticking around. This has been like straight 3 hours of coding together, which says something about you guys that want to, really learn how to do this and are willing to spend time on a Saturday to do it. Before we close out, one thing, I want you guys to have this finished by Sunday night. It's not hard. There's like the last little parts, like if you stick around, you could probably get it done in the next hour. But have this done, let your TLs know, and be done with it quick, because like you're on your way to have it finished. You're almost there. Can I answer any more questions for you guys as of right now? And let's also do this. Will you give me a yes in the chat if this is working for you? Like everything that we've done, is it working the same way on your end that it's been for mine? Mark's good. Brian's good. William's good. Austin's good. Jerry, Andrew, do you guys need a little bit more help?
No, I wasn't typing it out. I was just taking notes.
Okay. I am, for the sake of this, I'm not going to post this code publicly. Because you guys have sat with me through it, I will DM it to you. But I'm obviously not going to post it in the channel, because like people who weren't here spending the time like don't deserve to have this. So if you need this code, please DM me and I can zip it up and send it to you. I will post the video after it finishes uploading. It's a longer video, so it'll take a little bit more time. But if it's working for you guys, then you're in a really good spot to just finish it out. Any other questions before we close out?
I got one, but it's probably like the easiest question here. So I did finish the app and I got it running. The thing is, my on the abilities, my text label is like cutting off some of it. Should I actually truncate the text, or should I just make it wider and just reset constraints? Like, which do you think is actually better?
I'll work on the constraints with you. I'll close out the recording, and then let's work on the constraints together. And I also told Will that I would help him with his cell populating. So other than those two questions, if you guys don't have anything to stick around for, I'm going to close out the recording. Stay in the chat or in the Zoom if you need help. But I will help you two with those just kind of like edge cases right away, if that's okay.
Yeah, Mark, I had the same thing.